Internet. This has been Brode, and you're watching Born to be Cosmo. Oh, snap. Cosmo.
Welcome to Born to be Cosmo, the flexibly scheduled podcast where we talk about all things Marvel Snap. I'm here with my two good friends and co-hosts, Nate Wolfe, ZombiesGoNomNom. We haven't had a show in a little while, but I think that this is the opportune time to have one, as we have a lot of great things to talk about and some other things that, well, depending on your point of view and perspective and how you feel, may not be so great. But we aim to keep a balanced perspective as part of our philosophy of keeping it Cosmo. Before we get into the actual agenda, I just want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy June, happy Pride Month. Really excited about the Twitch drops that currently are underway with the two variants to celebrate Pride, our favorite duo, Sarah and Angela. Yeah, they look really great. And, I think it's wonderful that for all my gripes about the Snap community, I wish it to be a welcoming, safe, and inclusive space. And I think for the broadest majority, it is. So keep being kind to each other and have a wonderful June. Have you guys gotten your drops yet? I got mine last night.
Yep, I got the first day.
Yeah, I got them today. I finished them today. I started yesterday. I got the rest today. It's 6 hours is a long time to watch Twitch.
Yeah.
So
you know,
I mean, it's a little bit of a joke. I hate to say it, but sometimes you just put on the stream and then you kind of walk away, and then come back later. Like, did I get it yet?
Yeah, I did that while I was sleeping. I just put on a stream and I was asleep, and yeah, it worked out. But I love when they do thematic ones, whether that's themed to like the artist that's featured that month, like we got the Peach Mocha one, or this month the Pride variants. I think it's so much cooler having like a dedicated cool thing than just like a random variant. So it's nice to see them do that again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
last year they sold the Pride.
Yeah, it was a bundle,
variants.
right?
It was a
And this time
bundle,
it was for
and
free, so it's nice to
yeah.
see change.
And I think these are better than the ones last year. Last year was America Chavez and Iceman.
Iceman.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The best Iceman variant.
I actually didn't think it was so bad as all that, but these are so much more awesome. They're colorful, and you could tell they were purposefully created for this specific purpose. And yeah, the drops are awesome. It's really nice for them to do that. It's a great way to kind of give you guys in the content creation space a little bit of a bump, which can be hard going into the summer, as I learned from you over the years, zombies.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's important to call this out. It's just unfortunate that this came at a time with so much other things happening that it's really easy to kind of get caught up in the negative without celebrating the positive. And this is certainly one that I think really bears words hard. It is worth calling out. The other piece of big news is our very own ZombiesGoNomNom. Not only is a full-time Marvel Snap content creator, ZombiesGoNomNom is a global rank 1 full-time content creator.
Woohoo.
It's hitting rank 1's a big deal, even if you only get to the top of the summit for a little bit. It's a big achievement, and I think really cements your reputation as being one of the top players as well as content creators. And you're not rank 1 anymore, but you've been bopping around and
Yeah, I'm washed. I'm rank 4 now.
5. Yeah, there you go. So that in itself is impressive.
You lend a little bit of credibility to the show.
I mean,
nice to hear.
Zombies was the credibility before. Not that we do this for anything other than for the joy of it, right? But no, I mean it's awesome. And Yeah, it's great. Cinco Boy in chat, cool seatbelt, Blutrane.
It does look like a
So I don't think chat knows this, but I had a busy month as well. I broke my arm.
So he doesn't fall
Um,
out of his chair. It's cool.
yeah, so I don't fall on my chair. I broke my arm. We haven't had a podcast since I broke it. I broke my
Yeah.
elbow specifically. I fell down dodging a pigeon that was engaging
Holy
in a
cow.
super effective attack. And
Oh,
I
jeez,
actually
Pidgey.
I went out yesterday. I went downtown to see a friend of mine, and I walked past the place I fell,
Yeah.
and a sign caught my eye. Do not feed the pigeons. $10,000 fine. I took a picture of it. I'll send it to y'all after.
That's funny.
I broke my arm snapping. I got so mad I put my fists through the wall and I broke my left arm. Now I fell down running for a bus like an idiot. Yeah. So, anyways, who cares about that? Yeah, rank 1. So tell us a little bit about your journey there. I was there when you hit infinite and stream zombies. And we were like joking like what you were gonna place, and everyone was like, oh, 50 or 20 or whatever. And then you hit the button and it said 2.
Yeah, I was surprised.
And we all did a double take.
I was like,
And yeah, that was really awesome to see. But then you managed to it was like you were if I recall correctly, the person who was rank 1 was like considerably in front of you in terms of snap points, right?
they had a solid little lead, and I was like chasing it pretty well. Like I was getting a lot of cubes, but they were getting more cubes faster. And I think also part of it was I did this on I guess it was technically the second day, but it was really the first day. I started my climb late at night, and so by the time I finished it, it was like 3 or 4 in the morning Eastern.
Ooh.
And so the pool of players that are there is really small because there are not a lot of people in Infinite yet. Like there actually were way more people technically in Infinite than I would have expected looking at like the rank numbers, but the matchmaking was really limited because a lot of the people I would normally face were either not Infinite yet, or if they were Infinite, a lot of them were asleep. Like a lot of people stopped playing. They hit their Infinite and then they stopped because it's like a weeknight, whatever.
Yeah.
And I started late. And so even though I was getting a lot of wins and good cubes, the queues were like, it was wild queue. It was like 3 to 4 minute queues at least. So it was that made it harder to like chase because the other person is in Asia, where it was more like closer to like a peak time, like I don't know, like 6 or 7 at night when you imagine more people are playing the game. So I imagine they didn't have as long queues.
I must
Which is
interject for a
tricky.
moment here and perhaps explain to our audience what wild queue is, because they probably
They might not
some
know.
folks came from Hearthstone. So Hearthstone is another card game like Marvel Snap. It's actually the game that Ben Brode created
known for,
before
right? Yeah.
creating Snap. And there's a rank in Hearthstone called Legend. It's the same thing as Infinite, basically. And Wild is the eternal format in Hearthstone. And the joke is, if you hit Legend and Wild Hearthstone, particularly early in the month, but frankly, it seems like it's all month now, and you're like in the top 5, you'll sit there in the queuing screen sometimes for like 10, 15 minutes.
It can be
I've
long.
seen Corbett,
Yeah.
like when Corbett was streaming regularly. It was absurd. And
Mercenaries had the same problem too.
well, yeah. Yes,
I remember it
Mercenaries
would
had
get
a lot
long
of other
queues.
problems.
But yeah, that's the context. The queues took a bit and whatnot, but I was really pleased with the deck I played at the time. I was using Thena. It was funny. I wasn't even going to finish the Infinite climb. I got to 90 and was like, well, it's kind of late and I've been streaming for a while. I was like, I'll probably stop at 90. And then I just kept winning. I was like, all right, well, we're already almost Infinite. I'll get to Infinite and then I'll end for the night. And then we enter and it's 2. And I'm like, I'd like to get number 1. And the funniest thing was, in spite of staying up for an additional like 3 or 4 hours and gaining a lot of snap points, like I started at like 8,700, which was higher than I expected. But I think I gained over like 200 that night at least, which is like that's a lot of snap points.
Yeah, that's a lot. When I broke my arm, I was basically sitting in the emergency room, waiting, playing Snap, and I got 100 snap points in that session. I was in that waiting room for a long time, and I was like, damn,
Yeah.
that's a lot of snap points. At 200 after you hit infinite, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
you weren't playing against slouches either. You're playing against all the sweaty tryhards
Well,
like
early
you.
in the season, you do get some slouches because, and this is such a fascinating phenomenon to me, because there are so few players, you occasionally would get the Agatha farmers. And I was always confused by
Oh,
this because I didn't get how Agatha decks were infinite on day one, right? Because if they're an Agatha farming deck, you would think that Agatha's not going to climb you to infinite on the first day, right? So I
right.
don't know if they pilot a regular deck and then get to the Agatha farming, or something I suspect is their internal like MMR is so low from playing Agatha, the game feeds them more bots than regular people get. Like it
Or
treats
other
them.
Agatha bots.
Yeah, I think there's got to
Or
be
yeah.
some reason to it because this is the second or third season. Because I've only really been playing ladder more the last like 2 or 3 seasons, and this is the second or third time I've noticed this where it's only on day one because after that there are enough people in the pool where they just keep falling and you won't see them anymore if you're higher up because their rank is obviously not higher up because they're playing Agatha. But it's also really fascinating to see how the different Agatha people build the different decks because legitimately, like, it wasn't like it was all free wins. I mean, I obviously knew they were going to play Agatha every game, but like the way they built some of these Agatha decks was actually really interesting because they were built in a way to optimize the fact that the cards are being played like randomly. So it was stuff that like some had stuff that spread power throughout the board more. Some had like the Mysterio Mockingbird. One had like a Captain Marvel for like if it
Right.
played in the wrong place. And it was just really interesting to me to see how some people
The
built
Agatha
those
meta.
decks. Yeah, like it was kind of fascinating. That was actually part of the reason Shang-Chi was so good for me in this deck was because there were like 3 different people doing the Agatha stuff. Um, so it was kind of funny. And there was also one person playing like the Namora deck, which makes 2 things really tall. So Shadow King
Right.
Shang was really good. But then after like, the next day or two when more people got into Infinite, I ended up dropping the Shang because there were less targets for it. But I didn't actually hit one that night where I like kept trying and trying. Like I was just even though I was gaining a lot, the queues were too slow. So I
Yeah.
went to bed and I tried it again the next day and I climbed a little bit and I got there.
That's so awesome. The other awesome thing too is that, I never deck shame, but I do celebrate when
No
someone
X.
deck innovates. Yeah, this is your
Yeah.
list. You just kind of, put it together to play with Nina because, that was the new card.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just a
Safety
solid.
deserves some credit here too because I didn't play a whole lot right as the season dropped, and I saw he got a really fast infinite
Mhm.
too. And the list he posted was super similar to this list, except he was trying Captain Marvel and something else. I think, yeah, I think that's the deck right there. Uh, I think it was maybe just Shang and Captain Marvel. So like he had a very similar idea, a few different
Mm,
choices. Like, yeah, he had Hope Summers at the time, who I think we both agreed isn't super needed. And Marvel's a neat idea, but it can be tricky sometimes because you have so many twos and threes
yeah.
that it can be
Thena
hard. Yeah.
Thena's interesting because it I you were talking about how I was comparing it to Wolf before. Um, it does require a certain discipline in terms of both turn optimization and card selection to use well. I was running
Yes.
Thena with Hope originally also, and I really liked it for reasons, but the reality is that it's counter synergistic. It's just not obvious that it's counter synergistic until you've played a fair number of games with it. So, at first you'd think, oh yeah, you play Hope with Thena, then you can play 2 more expensive cards. But really, Thena is so good that it's just better to like not have to rely on having Hope as a combo piece for Athena, and just making the cards more naturally, you know, lend themselves to being played to a turn.
Yeah, this is like, I feel like the Kitty Angela Athena stuff is kind of like aggro in Snap in a way,
Yep.
where this is like, hey, I have 2-drops that are going to punch way above their weight, or like Kitty Pride's going to get, even though Kitty's not exactly like a 1-drop because you're paying for her all the time. But like specifically Angela and Athena, it's like these 2-drops scale really big. Like it was not uncommon to have a 210 or 213 at best, usually Athena, and that's, I mean, that's kind of old Loki collector number, right? Like big number.
Yeah.
It gets to be a really big number.
In fairness, though, it's not nearly.
You do
as
have to work for it, though. It's
Yeah, you
not
have to work
free.
for it.
Like that's a big thing in the deck construction here. Is
Yeah.
this deck is built in a way where it complements only playing 2 cards a turn, because a lot of the times you'll be doing 2-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 2-drop, or Kitty and a 2-drop, Kitty and a 3-drop. Like it just, the natural curve supports what Athena wants to do, and it does lead to decision making later on sometimes where you're like, do I really need this Athena buff on the final turn, or should I play like an extra card if I have the opportunity to do that? Which is kind of an interesting decision.
I've been trying to optimize my Loki deck for Athena. And you know what I ended up doing? I don't actually know if this is good or not, because the deck just is so mid right now into the meta. I think it's good. I put Mirage in instead of Cable, because Mirage is really good in that it still gives you that little bit of heads up information, but it
Yeah,
gives you a card that will naturally be easy to play into Athena with a buff that gets buffed itself.
that's
And
true.
I found it's been really good at proccing Athena, but the deck feels so like, I had good success with it on stream, but there's so many bad matchups. But yeah, Athena's really cool. It's probably my favorite release in a long time. I like these small cards that scale. I'm an
Yeah.
aggro gamer, so the fact you call it aggro kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, right. Because like we went through a pretty long period of time in Snap, right, where Angela was nerfed, all the scalers kind of got nerfed, and one big complaint from that period in time was like it felt bad that like just make big number strategies were
Yeah.
just like the best thing to do for a bit.
Thanos being king, yeah.
Yeah, Thanos. There were some others, but Thanos was really the outlier there, in terms of just slamming big stuff. And previously, like the scaling stuff could get pretty big too. And then old nerfed Angela, nerfed Werewolf, all these other cards, just there weren't early game scalers that were worth playing anymore.
No, we were still playing Angela as a 2/2 that gained +1. Like that's how
we were
desperate
coping.
were.
We were
So,
coping.
yeah,
It was so much worse. And
yeah.
I like that a card like this exists, especially given that, unlike the more recent cards, this is a card like everybody has too, right? Which is really nice. And it's also a big reason why some of the new cards are like better than some people thought they might be. Nocturne being a big example of this, because Nocturne, any card that can move out of a lane has natural synergy with Angela, because you get the proc and you're not committed to keeping your card in that lane. And that's one of the reasons Nocturne, I think you're going to see her still just keep popping up in a lot of decks. She's like, it's not as crazy as 2-drop Jeff, but I think it's about as close to 2-drop Jeff as you can be while being a 3-drop.
I mean, yes, and you need, like, Snap has evolved with the card releases in a way where it's very important in certain situations to fill your lane up, but not
Yes.
fill it up so that you can't play there anymore.
Yes.
Leaving the slot open is a lot more dangerous than it used to be.
Yeah,
You've got
Widow,
cards like
Annihilus,
Widow,
right? Like there is, you didn't have to worry about that stuff as much in the past.
Ravonna and Goblins. Man, Ravonna, Goblins, and Professor X. Like, everyone complains about Cannonball with Professor X, and we'll talk about that in a second. But man, the Goblins tilt me way more.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Nocturne lets you move power around, but it also denies the opponent from dapping your power, which is a very powerful strategy. And one of the main meta decks right now. Your deck was an interesting way of tackling the problem of hitting infinite. I took a much less finessed route, and I ended up playing good old high Evo with Rogue instead of Cosmo. And the reason that I did that, and the reason why it actually worked, was because Leech turns off Cannonball, and Leech turns off Hela. And right now, I feel like the meta is really, it's tilted more towards X and Cannonball, and which is good against Hela. It's pushing Hela out. But there's just
She's
so
still
much.
around though. Not
Yeah,
pushing her all the way out.
I mean, my climb, I swear, every second game felt like Hela or Cannonball Professor X, and just
Yeah.
you snap, you leech them. They're all on reveals, and now leech gives you 5 points of power, which is better than it used to be marginally. It's hard for those decks to deal with the Hulk She-Hulk nonsense when you've turned off their trump card. But I think that those two decks are right now. We looked on Untapped before the show, and Lockdown, as it's referred to, is nearing 20% of play, not only in Infinite but in Ladder as well. Like in the entirety of Ladder. There's an OTA next Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, and I would be very surprised if Professor X or Cannonball, or maybe even both, get some form of adjustment.
I don't think they're going to touch Cannonball, mainly because I think Cannonball isn't that offensive of a card without Professor X being right alongside it. And I like the idea that Cannonball's a cool finisher for like a junk deck. Like the Titania Goblin, White Widow, Dr. Octopus. I know a lot of people still don't like that kind of deck, but compared to the Professor X deck, I'd take that any day of the week. Because sometimes that Dr. Octopus isn't super good, especially when people are playing cards like Jeff and Nocturne and Kitty Pryde and whatnot. The Dr. Octopus is not a guarantee. There's usually risk there. And
well, that it goes back to why we were saying why cards like Nocturne and Jeff are so essential. And Kitty kind of fills the bill too, right? I mean, if you ock someone and they can play in that lane, it's probably
you're usually
not
pretty sad.
Cannonball
Like that's
for you.
usually
Yeah.
really bad for you
Yeah.
most of the time. So there's a risk reward there. And that's what I feel like they initially wanted Professor X to be, was more of like a risk reward. But the way these new decks utilize him, and with Ravonna helping cheat him out, it's like it's really hard to, if one of the Professor X decks has like a good curve, like they can just put out so much power and then close it down, and it's hard to do much about it.
What if they buff Professor X to be a 5/2 so it doesn't work with Ravonna anymore?
I've seen quite a few people make that suggestion.
Really?
And
Unironically, I'm kind of
yes.
being a bit of a snot suggesting it.
Unironically, I think it would actually make him worse, specifically in the deck he is played right now.
Right.
Because that Ravonna ramp is way more valuable than him having an extra point of power. Like no meme. But I think they've never liked when this card is super popular. That's why it got knocked down to a 5/1. It was really popular as a 5/3 in Thanos, and Thanos would ramp it out. And we've been here before, even before Cannonball came out. Cannonball just made it better.
Yeah. We all know how much they hate Lockdown, right? They always have.
And even as a Lockdown enjoyer, I'm much more of a fan of like the older style Lockdown decks. Like I've played a bunch of this deck, and I had fun playing it. But when this is like a defining part, if not arguably the best deck in the game, I don't think it results in the best experience for most people. Like, and that's coming from someone who generally has enjoyed most of the Lockdown cards that a lot of people have hated. It's like I think it's just Cannonball doesn't mix well with Professor X. And looking at like how they viewed the card in the past and their stance towards like newer cards in general, I think they're much more likely to hit this older card that has been difficult for them in the past, rather than this newer card that, they still want people to want this new card. And I think Cannonball is a lot harder of a card to adjust in a meaningful way, because you can't really adjust the effect, I don't think, without like drastically just nuking the card. So then your answer is, okay, we could reduce the power, but much like Cannonball is just kind of like the new Shang-Chi or the new Alioth, right?
It's more like
Where
the
it's
new,
like,
it's more like the new Eliath, I feel.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like, except not having prio is usually better, right? But yeah, it's if you take some power away from it, it still has insane power because it's knocking the biggest thing out of your opponent's lane. So I
It's
don't
like
think that
Eliath
would like
because it's a
be
checkmate
great.
in the right
Yeah, it's like
circumstances.
it almost it theoretically represents like way more power than any 5 or 6 drop in the game. Like if you're gonna slam an Infinite and you get Cannonball, they don't care that you played 20 power because that 20 power is elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it results in a similar feeling that a lot of people didn't like from Alioth. And yeah, I think Cannonball is a lot cooler of a card in a world where Professor X doesn't exist. And I'm putting it on the record. I think the most interesting / funniest change they could do with Professor X is to essentially turn him into old Spider-Man. Make him lock down a lane for a turn, and make it so things can enter the lane. I mean, if they don't want to change the effect, you could do like the leech thing where it's like when they made it so leech only worked on turn 5 for a while there. Like Professor X, the next turn this lane is closed, so you can't ramp it out. That's a possibility if they want to leave the effect.
If they do that, it'll be an on reveal and it could be abs, man.
I guess that's true.
Hmm.
The good old absorbing
Double
Spider-Man days.
Spider-Man. Double
Yeah,
Spider-Man
everyone's
got me
favorite
my first
combo
Infinite.
from back in the day with Zabu.
Hey,
But yeah,
I didn't have Darkhawk, so I used what I had. I used my
yeah,
unique and limited connect
what a
collection
time.
of double Spider-Man people to
That deck was such a menace too.
It
God,
was-
the Zabu days were so crazy.
It was so
Release
gross.
Zabu. But yeah, just make it like old Spider-Man where it prevents them from playing cards, but cards can still be moved or added in. And obviously give it some power if you do that. Don't leave it a 5/1. But I think that's so much better, and it solves the cannonball issue because if they cannonball and your lane isn't hard locked, it's just like soft locked, like Storm. The cannonball can knock it into that lane, and so like that's a risk the cannonball player has now.
So would the soft lock mean that if you played it into Death's Domain, X would still die? Or if you played it into Luke's Spire,
If it worked just like the old Spider-Man, yeah.
Yeah.
It would still die, so it would lose utility. It would definitely be worse. I think there's no argument that like the X effect has always and always will be stronger than like the Spider-Man effect. But I think the effect is just like it seems hard for them to balance around in the long term if they want to keep other cards like Cannonball and Ravona as they are.
Well, this version that we have up on our screen of the Professor X Cannonball deck is the list that KM Best featured in their weekly personal tier list that they release that, gets a lot of visibility. So I suspect that you will be seeing these 12 cards a lot.
Not exactly these 12 cards because the number one question is, what can I replace some of these cards with? Because you might notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Series 5 cards and 1, 2, 3, 4 Series 4 cards. So a lot of people, Sage is a big one. Sage and US Agent are two of the big ones where even a lot of people I know who have a lot of the cards are like, what can I replace for these cards?
I don't
didn't
have
get them.
US Agent. I have it pinned. I don't have it.
It took me a long time to get it. And
yeah, it's rough.
I mean,
it is rough out there. So you're going to see, and I've already seen a lot of this, people will make their own budget replacements to try and make things work, like throwing in a Wolfsbane or like Safety had in his older version of the deck, like a Goblin. Or so don't be surprised if you see like substitutions and not the exact same 12, because a lot of people don't have the cards.
Yeah, a lot of people put goblins in these decks, but yeah, no, it's 20% of the meta.
Everyone's seeing a lot of it. It's very popular.
The other deck that people really despise that is still pretty prominent is Hela. And I think it was Chase Pitzer that tweeted this. I'm so tired of Hela. So tired of Hela. And I think that Hela is just, I don't know. It's non-interactable big numbers. It just feels like negative, if negative was super
If
consistent and not
Mobius didn't
susceptible.
exist.
Yeah,
It's like
well,
they
yeah.
need, in a game where they seem to like having a lot of these silver bullet tech cards, there isn't a silver bullet for Hela. It's like the silver bullet against Hela is they accidentally discard their Hela, which you might notice they've dropped Corvus to try and
Well, yeah,
reduce that happening, right?
most people are playing Corvus, but Husky
So
Puppy,
Sif can
who,
still get them, but like
yeah,
your odds are definitely better at maintaining your Hela. You're getting through your deck more with Jubilee and Blink. Like
yep,
it's kind of like when Hela was really, really good with Lockjaw, and it's the deck has become more consistent than it used to be. But I do
yeah,
think, unlike the Professor X stuff, I think they've shown that across the wider player base, they don't seem to view Hela as problematic. And I think the closest thing we've heard about like something they might change is maybe wanting to design something new that can provide a bit of agency against like what Hela is trying to do. Because really the main counter to Hela is like you have to like one thing some people
negative
were doing was like the
tribunal.
old, yeah, obviously Tribunal can go taller than it, but or with the ongoing list that was popular last month, you could get like the Gene into Cosmo, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the options are really limited. Like
Well,
they're
it
very
turns out
specific.
that Professor
Lockdown,
X is a
leech.
good,
Yeah.
yeah, Professor X is a good
Leech didn't
way
even
of,
reduce the Hela play rate that much, by the way. When they buffed Leech to a 4-drop, Hela's play rate and win rate stats, if I recall correctly, were not impacted nearly as much as a lot of other decks were.
yeah, no, it's funny you say that because most decks just can't eat a 4-2, or even a 5-5 as a tempo loss, but it does neutralize it. Blink is also really interesting. It's basically better Lockjaw, and the way this
Yeah,
this list is built, it's just gonna always get you
it
something
pulls
good.
something big for the
And with
vast
between
majority of the time.
Blink and Jubilee, you also have multiple ways of scooping Hela out as well.
Yeah, if you don't draw her, which is huge. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is the deck is it is very reminiscent of the old Lockjaw version where it feels more consistent than old Hela. Because at least old Hela it was like, well, if I don't draw my Hela, I'm not doing anything. Now it's like, well, if I didn't draw her, I could like YOLO blink and the odds aren't that bad. Usually you only have what, like 3 cards left in your deck. And some of those cards might cost less, so it might even be guaranteed in some cases.
If X dies, um, and we don't know if X will die, immediately in the aftermath of X dying, you will see a lot of this deck until someone
Yeah, that's
figures out.
probably true. I mean, it's still popular now,
Yeah.
even with X around, because
Let's see
it
its
puts
play rate.
out such a large number of stats when things go its way
Yep.
that it can afford for them to win the X lane because their Cannonball is only hitting one big thing, and you often end up having multiple big things. You don't care if your Infinite's getting hit if you also have like a Giganto and Death chilling there, you know?
Yeah.
It's about 5%, which is pretty significant with a really respectable looking win rate.
Yeah, the Hela is still quite good and
And most people
not
are not
crazy
playing it like
popular, but it's
this.
popular.
Yeah, this
A lot of
version
people are
is.
still playing the Corvus version, but I do think
Yeah,
the Colleen one is better.
I agree.
I've tried them
Um,
both. I played pretty much nothing but Hela last season, and I tried this. I think it was the same version out, and I kind of like the Colleen. It's just
Mm-hmm.
Corvus, like, yeah, discarding your Hela is like kryptonite to that deck. I mean, there's a couple outs, especially with Jubilee and Blink. Like, you can still pull some big threats, but Corvus, like, you've got 4 cards, and you're like, cool, I've got a 50% chance it's gonna discard my Hela, and then you just have to pray to Broad that like the RNG is gonna be in your favor, which is it's terrible. So
well, I mean, counterpoint is that it'll still ramp you, so you could still play 2
yeah,
big guys. However, the reason I don't like Corvus is because you basically have to snap before you play Corvus.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't snap and you wait to see if you drop Hela and then snap, a good player will retreat for 1. But if you snap and then you discard Hela, it's just, ugh, I don't know. I guess it's one of those, you have to just look at the macro and just accept that if you play Corvus, you'll low roll sometimes. That variance kind of really makes it difficult for me, but I think people are tired of this deck. But yeah,
I don't think it's going anywhere. If anything, it might become more popular. But yeah, it is what it is. I think Hela is in, I've said in the past, a similar situation as like Loki has been at points where it is even better at the higher levels. And because of that, it often gets left alone because the stats aren't as good lower down. But I do think Hela has way better stats lower down than Loki because obviously
it
there are
does.
much less complexities to playing Hela. It's like Hela's one of the more straightforward decks, right? So even though I
Right.
think it's worse, it's not like that much worse. But every time it gets brought up, they seem to be like, "Nah, it's fine." So I don't know. I would just like them to give us some way to teching against it other than being like, all right, I'll just play like a more all in bigger number combo deck,
Right.
or just because it's not satisfying when it loses to itself or when it loses to, oh, their things went the wrong way. Like, yeah, I'm happy they lost, but like, I don't feel like I made decisions most of the time that contributed to that win, right? It just, the dice didn't roll in their favor that time.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps there was a lot of things that happened in the past week that I want to touch on, but this kind of bridges that nicely because the overarching theme of Loki and Hela and how the balanced team talks about it versus kind of some of the other things we're going to segue to, there seems to be, I don't know a nice way of putting this, and I don't want to be snotty about it, but it does seem to me that the folks that work on this game are a little out of touch with what, at a minimum, their most engaged player base wants. And I would argue that the casual player base, of which I have a window into, is different, but not a whole lot different when it comes to kind of pricing. Casual players don't like Cannonball and X. I don't like Cannonball and X, although maybe not as much as the casual player. Hela, same kind of thing. So I don't know. Do you think I'm off base in saying that, and I'm just frustrated? Because that could also be the case. I don't want to. I want to be open-minded in exploring this because I think that there is a concern. If I'm right, if they are that out of touch, it seems like it's gotten like if there was a point of inflection, the deviation of where the game is versus where I would like it to be is widened considerably in the last year.
It's changed a lot really recently too. Like I feel like we went through a pretty long period of time where things were disliked, namely like how Thanos was getting every new card and it was like top deck for like I don't know, a couple months or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like we had a nice window after the initial Thanos nerf where things have been pretty good. And then also I feel like they did get better at releasing cards that are strong enough to see play and change the game without them necessarily breaking the game all the time.
Right.
Because we had quite a while in the last year of some cards releasing just way, way, way too strong. Like you can still debate some cards releasing too strong now, but it's a whole different ball game to
Yeah, you
compare
can't
them to
compare a release that was very
Loki.
strong like Hope with Loki. Like there's just no
Yeah,
comparison.
Miss Marvel, some of the
Right.
older ones like original Zabu and Surfer. Some of these old cards were just in a league of their own.
Yeah.
And I feel like they've gotten better at making more good cards and less duds, but also better at not releasing cards as broken as they did for like think about Loki month. Like every card that released that month except Ravonna, who eventually got buffed into being busted, was a nuts card. Mobius was a 2/3. Alioth was a 6/5. Loki was a 3/5. That month was
Yeah.
really stupid. Like all of those cards got significantly nerfed, and they're all still maybe not Alioth so much, but most of them are still really like strong and viable. So Ravona's divining this metagame even. So I think like they definitely have ups and downs, and I'm happy they've gotten a little better on like the quality of card releases. But I do think there are definitely like I think it's hard to know what the casual player base is like, even having a window into it, because I think it just varies so much user to user. And I think in that respect, it's not that different from the dedicated player base. Some people really like playing Professor X. Some people hate it. Some people like Hela a lot. So they're trying to like serve everybody. But eventually some of these decks, and they've made it clear there are certain ones they are more and less lenient about, and Lockdown's always been like, hey, yeah, that's one. Lockdown and Galactus have always been the, hey, this changes the game in a fundamental way, so we only ever want it to be so popular.
Oh, they killed Galactus. Make me want
I
to
know
cry.
we haven't talked about Galactus in a long time.
It's because he's dead.
Yeah, it is funny though. One thing I came across in my climb was that the Athena deck I played was so bad into Galactus. I had a random dude wave into Galactus me, and I just was like, all right, I guess I'm out. Like, I have no way to deal with anything they do. So that was kind of funny. I do like it as a surprise factor every once in a while, or doing like a YOLO blink into Galactus can be kind of funny too. But yeah, I think it's hard to gauge. But at least more recently, I feel like I've liked their OTAs and the card releases more than I have like in a lot of other times throughout the past year. I'm not loving the professor like the state of where we are right now, but also hopefully we won't be there that much longer. So
Yeah.
I'm fingers crossed on that, because I do think it's limiting the game, and if that changes, we'll probably see more experimentation, diversity, and churn, and that's kind of what you want to see in a metagame, right? Like there was a pretty decent window there where I really feel like I was seeing such a variety of decks and Snap. I mean, even now with the Professor X stuff being popular, at least higher up, there still is a decent amount of experimentation going on. I think that's in part because a lot of the people higher up are in agreement that the Professor X stuff is not long for the world, so they want to try stuff to not only beat that, but see what can be viable in a world where that's not like a core thing you have to consider. But I do feel like variety has gotten better, and I think that always makes card game stuff better. And then when something comes to the top, like the Professor X, the variety goes down, and then people get more frustrated. So it's hard to strike a balance.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with you that the releases have gotten better. Just sometimes when reading how they
Oh
how
yeah,
they
there are
think about
definitely
balance.
still ones, and I'm sure we'll see ones in the future where it's like, where did this come from? Like the Adam Warlock changes, like
Yeah,
Oh
but
gosh, yeah.
but more often than not, I feel like things have gotten to be like a little bit more expected, and there being less things where I'm like hard scratching my head at like, why is this happening?
right. Well, something happened recently that had us all scratching our heads, and this is relating to a bundle that was
Before
for
we talk
sale.
about the bundle, I
Yeah.
was curious if we wanted to give any quick thoughts on Thanos, because there hasn't been that. I don't think there's been that much like meta buffing and nerfing since the last time we talked. But Thanos is one I did want to shout out really quickly because we talked about how he was like a defining card, and then he got nerfed into oblivion. And they said, "Don't worry, guys, we're gonna revisit him." And now we got the revisiting of Thanos, and it's
Are you
interesting. I
trying to
think
mock me, Nate? Logo Thanos?
Peach Thanos album variant next month.
That
By
is
the
gonna
way,
be a very
Coming soon,
expensive.
TM.
Yeah,
yeah, I learned that with
cost
the
me.
double Rian albums this month.
Oh,
It was a lot.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that
No, you're
triggered me.
fine. But it's
It
neat.
triggered me.
It's really cool that they revisited Thanos, and for the most
Yep.
part, I like what they did, and I have seen others as well as myself have some okay success with Thanos. Even though I think it's definitely a card that will probably benefit more from a not so X Cannonball meta.
Why? But you can make Thanos unstop. You can make Thanos into Big Jeff.
I do like that, and it is funny. I've seen a number of screenshots where I guess people don't read the blue stone because they end up cannonballing the Thanos into the X lane, and it's pretty funny. But I like the idea of like, hey, like the deck actually wants you to play your Thanos, and it gives you means of playing it more flexibly, like the Time Stone now, making it a 5 permanently. It can't be destroyed or discarded. You can play it anywhere. Like, I think that's a really cool element to the card, and I think it's been pretty positively received as like a change. It's like Thanos. I've seen Thanos since this change, and it doesn't feel super overbearing, but it feels like it can win games. And I think that's where you want a card like this to be. Like, people really like Thanos. It's a beyond iconic character. His whole thing is like the name of the game, right? Snap. So I'm happy we saw this kind of these changes, and I'm
just wish
hopeful for
Time
Thanos in
Stone.
the future.
I just wish Time Stone cost 1 instead of 2.
Mind Stone. Yeah, I was actually wondering if they could get away with putting it back. I think maybe, but also after seeing how surprisingly decent some of these Thanos decks did, I understand why they decided to start it without it, because Thanos was dominating for a while. And I could see them leaving it, but I feel that.
I haven't played any Thanos since the change. I've played against Thanos since the change, and it is an interesting experience now because Thanos is now the core of the threat, right? And as you play stones,
you want to play him. You used to never want to play him.
Yeah, the stones kind of start to mount the threat. One makes him playable anywhere. One makes him cheaper, right? So you can play Thanos and a 1-drop like a
you
demon.
Can Shuri Thanos.
Yeah. So what's going to end up happening, and I feel so silly for saying this, is when the Peach Momoko album comes out, I'm going to drop a boatload on Peach Momoko variants and get this Thanos, and then I'm going to feel stupid for doing that. I'm going to probably play lots of Thanos. Well, we'll see. I think that it's hard to say, but if they want Thanos to be the centerpiece, then I think they've succeeded, and it's pretty cool. So yeah.
Yeah, more fun than it just being another ramp
variant
deck, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the play. Like Zoo was one I particularly played a lot with Thanos, because I played like a typical Thanos where it's like, oh, you have bigger threats you're trying to cheat out, and I've seen some people just stuff the Professor X Cannonball into Thanos and it works, which is funny.
I think that's probably the best way to build it, and it's like
it could be, yeah.
It won't be after next week, and I think then
Probably
it'll be
not.
a lot more compelling to play it, because I just don't want to do that. It's not that I mind playing against it, it's just not something that...
The Zoo was way more fun and successful for me than I was trying to play one with like Scar and 10 power cards, and I kept getting randomly shanged. So I switched to Zoo, and I had a lot of fun with the Thanos Zoo, even using like the new pass card. So I was pretty surprised and happy with how it felt, because I've always liked Thanos Zoo as an archetype, and it's nice to see it feeling a bit more back from the dead.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's a good shout out. I totally didn't even give it any thought because I hadn't really played much of it, and I think that it will have its day. Thanos is one of the deck archetypes that has traditionally been ones that I've enjoyed, so I think it
make the biggest deck ever with like the Arshim. Put Thanos and Arshim in the same deck, and just lose even harder to Darkhawk.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say it's too bad Blob doesn't work the way Blob used to, because then
yeah,
watch the Darkhawks go to 0. Yeah, I'll definitely experiment with it. Yeah. So kind of segueing to the non-gameplay portion of the podcast, there was a bundle. There are a lot of bundles in the shop. Perhaps you've noticed this. I certainly have, and some of them are of good value, others are not. This was $100 bundle, or if you live in Canada, $140, or however much.
God.
$100 bundle US is $140 in Canada, and I think they're $150 in Australia. And of course, they're even more expensive in Brazil or other countries that have different currencies. And there was kind of a lot of confusion the other day. Basically, people woke up and launched Marvel Snap and realized that the Gambit variant that they purchased for $100, that is appearing on the left side of the screen, where Gambit is looking all grizzly holding up 3 cards, is now lying on a bed 2 cards?
Oh, it is 3. Never mind.
Okay.
I literally, I've
well,
only ever noticed the 2. I've only ever noticed the 2 at the top. I'll be honest. That's funny. I
Well,
thought it was a king and queen.
there you go. It was replaced with the basically like a palette swap
It's the
of
meme.
like,
It's the Wolverine meme. Yeah.
Wolverine on the bed. Instead of Wolverine, it's now Gambit. And so it would seem as though the reason for the change, before we get into the meat of this, is the artist of this Gambit. And this happened over 5 years ago,
Yeah, like 7
pre-pandemic.
years ago. I think.
When they were making art for Snap, they were including
Marvel, not Snap.
Sorry, yeah, Marvel. Snap didn't exist 5 years ago. Thank you. When they were making art for Marvel, they were putting inappropriate Easter eggs into the art. I've heard it being anti-religious. Some people said it was anti-Semitic. Whatever it was, they were including something that did not encourage an inclusive or safe space. And I think they fired this artist. And
Yeah,
the
they just
Snap
decided
team,
to stop working with them.
yeah, and the Snap team, a lot of the art for Snap is created on commission for the
it's
game
old.
specifically.
Well,
but they
I wouldn't
also
say a
source-
lot.
No,
I guess a lot,
there's a
but-
lot that are recycled comic book covers. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's both. They do a lot of commissioning, but also I think more art in the game is from old. It's from art that Marvel commissioned in the past for comic books, basically, and they have a big library of stuff that they can use for that.
And this one was one of those old. This is an older image from I don't know where. Anyways, they just switched it without telling anyone because of the controversy.
Yeah,
around
they had a
the
little
person
line
who
in the
created
patch
the art.
notes because it came in the patch, and they said
Right.
we've updated this art and we replaced it with the new one. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. And that was all the mention about it. And most people, even people really tuned into the game, like myself, had not heard anything about this. Like the
No.
patch was for most people the first time this had been brought up. Obviously it was someone raised attention to the issue because that's how they got it changed. But like, it's not something most people had heard about, and it took people by surprise. And also, one like huge thing I don't really understand how they like overlooked is like a lot of the reactions I saw. A lot of people were understanding of why they wanted to remove it, but you gotta like you sold people one thing, now they have another thing, and that thing isn't the same type of thing at all. Like if you look at these two pieces of art, they're appealing to very, very different towards of players or styles, right? Like
one of them is a meme,
joke,
like
and one is like more like serious, badass kind of like style. Like
Or as someone said, I don't even remember who said this. One is like, a premium piece of artwork, regardless of the circumstances with which it was created, and the other is a variant that you wouldn't pay 700 gold for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people agree with that. I'm sure there'll be some people there who like it better, and more power to you. Art is subjective, but I think a lot of people really wanted. It's also worth mentioning the time context of this as well, where this bundle was sold at kind of the peak of X-Men 97. And Gambit was a very prominent part of that, a character a lot of people really liked, even though it's never been the most meta card in Snap or anything. It's a character and a card a lot of people really liked and had some attachment to. And without a doubt, for a lot of players, it was a driving force in spending a very large sum of money on a bundle. It wasn't the only thing they got in the bundle, but it's not unrealistic to say there was a large amount of players who, if this wasn't in there, they wouldn't have spent the $100.
Or more, depending on where you live. I'm sorry to like harp on this, but like,
no, it does suck.
like $100 sucks. $150 sucks even more.
Yeah, it does.
And I think that so there was an outcry, and there was compensation that was announced for those that purchased this bundle of 1,200 gold, which is the equivalent of a premium variant. And well, you know what? I think that you very succinctly
Whales unite.
you very succinctly summed up the
Whales
sentiment
together
in the
strong.
tweet that's on the screen. So why don't we hear it in the voice of the author?
Yeah, I mean, I just tweeted out, I don't think it's a fair swap. for something locked behind $100 bundle. Encourage contacting the sport about compensation, because this was when we didn't really know too much about it. I think this was even before they announced initial compensation, I want to say. And yeah, it's like I think a lot of conversation dived into the whole like separating art versus artist. Some people believe that, some people don't believe that. I think it's really like aside the point. And the bigger thing is, I think most people can agree that people who liked the thing on the left probably aren't necessarily going to like the thing on the right as a replacement, because they're
Yeah.
appealing towards very different groups, styles, that kind of stuff.
Well, different people bought the bundle for different reasons, right?
100%. Yeah, I was one of those people. And like in the video I did about it, I was like, I'm not as mad on a personal level about this, because even though I really liked the Gambit, it wasn't the driving force for me. The driving force for me was this was the first bundle in a long time that had high credits and high gold. I liked the Gambit, but I actually really liked the Shadow King more, and that's a card I play more. So those two things were higher up in terms of like, hey, this is why I'm going to buy this for me, than the Gambit was. But on the other side of that coin, there were a lot of people who were in the exact opposite position, who bought it purely because this was like their favorite character and their favorite art for it.
Yeah.
And without that in there, it wouldn't have been something they were willing to spend such a high amount of money for. And this is when they tried to do initial compensation, and when they were like, okay, we'll give you guys 1,200 gold as a bonus, the idea being, oh, you can just go buy another Gambit variant, right? But I think that was kind of a case of wanting to have your cake and eat it too, because it's no secret that in Marvel Snap, they price bundle variants at a premium, right? And this is why we never see them return. They're selling that exclusivity. I think there's no argument against the fact that a variant you have from a bundle that is no longer being run, it's not the same as a 7 or 1,200 variant you can buy in the store, because you can't buy that anymore. And when you do buy that, oftentimes you either have to pony up a larger sum of money or a larger sum of gold than what you're spending in the store. And you have a limited time to do that. So like they very much account for that in their business model, that, hey, we're selling exclusivity and that's just a part of it. And whether you like it or don't like it or don't care about it, like we have to acknowledge that's the world we're living in, right? And so it feels disingenuous when someone's like, well, it's just a 1,200 gold variant, guys. Like all the expensive variants are 1,200. How can this be worth more than 1,200? Well, it was worth more than 1,200 to people who coughed up $100 or $150 with the main intention of getting this thing they really wanted. So that was one thing that there weren't a lot of people doing it, but there were some, and it really irked me, because it either shows they don't really understand like how the system works, or they do understand and they're being disingenuous, which there are definitely some of those people. But there is, I think, probably the most like riled up and heated I have seen people since like the Mobius nerf. Even people, I saw a lot of people speak up who didn't even buy the bundle, who were just like, yeah, this just doesn't. And the thing is, we've talked about like, things that can damage consumer confidence before. There's a really big difference between damaging consumer confidence of a free-to-play or a pass-only player and damaging consumer confidence in the people who are spending $100 on your silly mobile game. Because those are the people that are keeping the lights on, and those are the people, like, it's also worth acknowledging this served as a reminder, even to people who didn't buy the bundle, hey, these are digital goods, right? These can go away at any time. And this is a big reminder of that
Yep.
anything can go away at any time. You don't own anything. And that's a really easy way to make people feel less good about spending money on your digital product.
It's insane. You have a license to them. You pay for a license to them, which can be revoked at any time, and you don't have any say over it. So
it was funny though, in their terms
beware.
and conditions, people actually dug into the terms and conditions, and they specify like anytime a month after you buy something, it could potentially be revoked. but the bundle hadn't actually been live for a month. It was just under a month. So some people were pointing out, well, technically they broke their own terms. And I just had a chuckle at that. It was pretty funny. But yeah, the first attempt at compensation was 1,200 gold. Also, like at first they were saying people should contact support rather than giving it to everybody, which also that's just a really weird angle to take, I think.
Well, it's like the insurance strategy, right?
Yeah,
You
it is
just
the
gotta hope
insurance
that
strategy.
people won't make a claim. Yeah, actually, there you go. Yeah, and so I felt bad for the people that just got the variant, and then people are like, I put X amount of dollars into splitting this card because I wanted to
Yeah,
be the
that's a
first
factor too,
person.
right? Like a lot of people use their credits on splitting the card to get a cool split for it, and now they have one that they might not want to use instead. And
Or the
it's like,
worst are those that made that their infinite conquest reward.
yeah,
and
those
got it.
people lost the worst because like, oof, that's rough. Because a lot of people don't have a lot of the Infinity Conquest borders, so you
Most
pick
people
one you really
don't.
like.
I'd like to
And
know what the average is for the
me
highly, like,
too. Yeah.
for people that hit infinite, like, regularly. How many of those people, how many portraits do they have? I bet you the number's pretty low.
I would
Yeah,
agree. Yeah, I
Conquest
would agree.
it is a test of like mental stamina
Sure
more than
is.
an expression of game skill. It's tough. Yeah. So they ended up, there was a huge backlash. Of course, you had all the people saying like you're wrong to feel frustrated or disappointed, which again, don't do that ever.
No,
Like
no.
if someone, like anyone that had this swapped out, like saying like, oh, you got exactly what you deserve. 1,200's the value. People like, I just don't do that. Like that is like such a, and then what was hilarious was they relented and they offered additional compensation. And then on the announcement of the additional compensation, you had people actually like commenting like, "Don't do this. You owe these players
I
nothing."
saw
And it's
that
like,
too. I saw that, and yeah, it's exactly like the
oh,
picture we're featuring on screen here. Leave
it's
the
like my
multi-million-dollar
head.
company alone. It's like
Yeah. Don't be
this
like,
this currency. It's important to recognize that this 8,000 gold, which is what they changed the currency to, which by the way seemed to be a lot more fair to people, or people were much
right.
happier with than 1,200,
It's the
unsurprisingly.
equivalent of $100 in game currency,
But it
basically.
doesn't cost them $100 to give that to people, right?
No, that's the crazy thing
That's the
about it.
big like point, is that this is funny money. This is broad
Yeah.
bucks. This isn't costing the company. It doesn't take money from them, because the people doing this aren't necessarily going to go and spend another $100 to buy this gold. It doesn't cost them money to grant this currency. So you would think when you've just done something that really pissed off specifically, like it's got to be under 1% population of the game that buys these higher end things. When you both made them upset and made them kind of question their investment in the digital product because of how anything can be taken away, like, it's really not rocket science to understand that's probably the last group of people you want to actively anger in your free to play mobile game, right? That's like the last group you want to make question their decision about, like, is this game worth continuing to invest my time and money into? Because those are the people that are keeping the lights on, are they not? That's how mobile games work. It's the whales that bring in most of the money. And unsurprisingly, a lot of people who bought this bundle were whales.
Yeah. You're exactly
So they turned it
right.
around, and people are generally happy with the fact that, hey, all right, I will give credit to the community manager, because I do think the follow-up response was well written. I think it literally spelled out that they're agreeing with players that, where's the line here? Yeah, when it comes to bundles, different players value certain parts of bundles differently. Many view a certain variant or card as the full inherent value they're acquiring, while others view the currencies as such. See, this is exactly what we talked about, where different players want different things. And some of the people who didn't buy the bundle were like, but they got all this other stuff too, guys. They weren't just buying the variant. I think a lot of those players don't understand the perspective of a lot of whales, because speaking as a former whale, and knowing some people who wail very hard on the game, those players have so much currency available to them. The variants are often the main draw of these bundles because they're not hurting for currency. Like, they can get more currency at any time. Sure, they're more likely to get something if it's at a relative discount, but from what I know and have experienced, a lot of the times for players like that where currency isn't like the main driving point, the variants are the make and break for people. That's what pushes them over the line of like, hey, yeah, I'll spend money.
You know what? I spent the month that they did the Miles Morales Null as like the Omega Whale variant.
Yeah, the
like,
nullified Miles.
I bought all the crap so that I could get it because I've got all the Null ones, and I was like, hell, if I'm missing this.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's a great example of
and
like,
I don't
maybe
normally
you weren't
whale
as drawn to the currency, right? But you wanted that miles, so that was a means to get it. Was you have to spend X dollars.
And I don't normally whale out, but if there's something that you really want or you're really big fan of the character, like, yeah, I mean, I could see people doing it. It's not uncommon, I would think, at all.
Yeah, I think it's a very realistic depiction of how this works, basically. So I'll give props that although I think at first it wasn't handled the best, I think they maybe should have. Obviously, it's tough because everyone wants them to make a response quickly, but then sometimes when you do make a response quickly, that response isn't the right response, and then you end up having to, backtrack and do another one. So it's tough in the moment to say what the right initial decision can be sometimes. But I do think the second decision, it did a good job of being like, yeah, all right, you guys are making fair points, and we're going to give you way better compensation because you're the people that are spending the most money on this game, and we want you to keep supporting our game and not to feel like you got rug pulled, which is genuinely what a lot of people felt like. They felt like they had the rug pulled from them. They bought X, they got Y. Not to mention that I don't think the US, but like there are a lot of countries where I think legal consumer protections, even over digital goods, would probably have something to say about this.
It wouldn't have mattered as much if it wasn't $100+, right?
The reaction would have definitely been smaller if the bundle wasn't as expensive. Like, correct. I think people would have still been mad and there would have been reason to be, but I think it would have been much smaller if it wasn't in this really expensive bundle.
Yeah.
But it is, and that's the big thing is ultimately, and they said this themselves, the mistake is on them. So it's on them to own up to it. It's not on the players, right? Like, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. I imagine they have a lot of incentive for it to not happen again, because I can't imagine this was the most pleasant experience to go through when everyone's mad about something. And they do address like refunds too, which were a big part of the topic. And I'm glad they put that in there. Because if they can't physically do refunds and that's something you have to pursue through the respective storefront, that is a good piece of information to put out there. Some people, I'm sure, did pursue refunds, and if you don't know how refunds work in Snap, unlike a lot of other live service games, they don't actually just straight up ban you for charging back, but they do, I believe, correspondingly reduce the resources from your account. So if you had that 8K gold and the 8K credits or whatever, you can go into the negative if you didn't have enough to cover that after a refund. And that is one reason why I think refunds were a bit more complicated, though I think that is something some people probably did pursue through the storefront. But most of the people I saw were happy with the final resolution. We're like, all right, I'm okay with this. Thanks for making the compensation not terrible.
Yeah. Well, I think that
the last line is funny though, because of what else we're going to talk about with the. I mean, I know it's definitely written from a sincere place, but it is funny to be like, we know we lost some trust here, but we're going to work on rebuilding the trust into the roadmap and the IGN debacle and whatnot.
Well, so before we get into that debacle, I wanted to take a really quick segue because I'm still traumatized by Nate showing me the Peach Momoko Thanos. So Nate, in the chat, I posted all the variants that are going to be part of the Peach Momoko album, and I want to play a little game with you guys. How many of the variants on... So I'm a Peach Momoko enjoyer, and I own most of the Peach Momoko variants. How many variants do you think I'm going to need to buy from these 12 to complete the bundle, to complete the album day one?
I'm gonna go with 6.
I think I can actually figure this out maybe. Because I have a general idea of most of which of these are released and which are not, and most of these are not released.
Yeah.
The only released ones, if I'm correct, are Samurai, Jubilee, Null, and Strange. I don't think maybe the Enchantress, but I don't think she is. I think
Enchantress hasn't been released yet. No.
yeah. All right. So I think 4 of them are released. I don't know if you have them or not, but let's assume you do. Then you would need the other 8.
So I have Doctor Strange, Jubilee, and Null.
Okay, so you're missing Surfer.
Yeah.
And all the new ones.
And all the new ones. This is going to be, so that's how many variants? I have 3. There's 12. That's 9.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be 9 times
over 10K gold.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I've never bought gold, so I still have all the double gold.
Oh, you have the
bonuses.
double ones, yeah.
But like, Jesus effing Christ, like that is
It's
a lot.
expensive.
It's gonna be $100 if I want it.
Yep, should have bought the Gambit bundle.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, you couldn't have known. But that is unironically one of the reasons I purchased the Gambit bundle, because I have not been purchasing as much stuff in Snap, let alone I don't think I bought anything over the $20 point in quite a long time. So the Gambit bundle was the first thing in a while, and it was mainly because I wanted the gold for the 2 Rian albums, because I collect all the Rians.
Also, Peach Momoko has 2 nulls, and that's not the first null that was released.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, I did
Yeah.
not know that. That is funny.
So that really annoys me too. But I
do you have
that.
the right one?
I do, yeah.
Oh,
and I
good.
got Doctor Strange from a
Yeah, he was from the
mystery
event.
variant, like on
I
the
think.
pass or whatever.
I think he was. Wasn't Strange like one of the Twitch drops? Maybe no. He was random. I just got him randomly. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Tarot one.
Right. All right. Well, you'll get to laugh at me in a few weeks when that happens. Good grief.
Yeah, albums
but,
do be pricey.
So yesterday was on the heels of the Gambit bundle debacle and the less than cordial discourse among community members about it. Everyone was really looking forward to the roadmap and a lot of features that were coming out. And there was a tweet made several days ago to hype up that the Second Dinner team in partnership with IGN was going to preview new game mode and roadmap. And I was out of pocket all day yesterday, and I looked at my phone around 10 o'clock at night, and like our group chat just blew up, and I knew that was probably a bad sign. So, as someone that experienced the announcement in real time, Zombies, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened when this came out? Because I only unfortunately got to experience it after the fact, but it was something to see this in real time.
It was a mess. All right, first and foremost, please God never partner with IGN again. Good Lord. So I'm sure many of you might remember IGN from like the 2010s when they were a big part of like the review scene in gaming, and I mean I guess they're still around. I'm surprised they've survived all these years. But they partnered with them, and they were going to show it off in their live segment, right? And they had a schedule for the day. They had a live stream up, pretty straightforward. They're like, hey, 3 p.m. PST, 6 p.m. EST. That's when the Snap people are coming on the IGN live stage, and they're going to reveal the stuff. They promoted it, Twitter, I think on Discord, like, this was where you wanted to go to look at the new news, right? And it wasn't really coming anywhere else, at least first. So naturally, all the Snap people were like, okay, this is the schedule. I'm going to go watch it on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. And I was actually surprised by how overtaken the chat was by Snap people. Just demanding like, all right, Snap, where's Snap, where's Snap? And they had Snap in the title, right? Like they listed a few of the things they were showing. It was like a big live stream. And
it was on Twitch?
It was on Twitch and YouTube. It was on their website. It was on a bunch of different platforms, but it was all like the same stream. And well, for one, it turned out the live stream was different than the event, where the live stream had bits and pieces of the event, but they were all out of order and happening in a random order and not adhering to any schedule. So while the Snap people were on live and doing the stuff, it was showing entirely irrelevant things that the Snap people who showed up to watch it weren't interested in. One of which I only watched a little bit of it, but it was just this really like cringe segment where they were talking, like rating the top 10 Nintendo characters on like a whiteboard with the audience. It was really weird. It was just, as someone who's a certified gamer, I don't understand who that content is for. Maybe there are people out there that's for, but everyone I've talked to who saw it was just like, what is this? Like, why is this happening? At least some of the stuff on there was like other games getting showcased and like sensible stuff, but they had all these weird like filler segments and nobody knew. We even asked in the Discord, hey, it's 3 p.m. Like, where's the Snap announcement? And they're like, well, IGN's handling it. It's out of our hands. We don't know when it's going to go on. They were basically in the same boat as us, like where it's like, we don't know how they're doing this. And the funniest part was, so some people waited there for hours because it had been hours and they hadn't aired it yet. Now, about an hour and a half in, the information goes live in game. Because, you know, it'd been like an hour and a half after they revealed it. It went live in game and you could go to the news section and read up all on the roadmap and everything they wrote about it. So that was most people's first introduction to this. Wasn't even the event they hyped up because the event didn't come on before it. And this is the funniest part to me. They didn't actually show the event on the live stream. The live stream proceeded to end 4 or 5 hours after the time they initially said, hey, tune into the Snap announcement. And then like 20 minutes after the live stream ended, which, by the way, Marvel's Snap announcement was like in the title of that live stream, they uploaded a separate video on YouTube from the live event, which was the announcement. So the whole thing was just completely butchered from like an announcement perspective. It was actually, it's fascinating to me how companies seemingly so successful can do just such a terrible job presenting. That was actually crazy to me, and I really hope, I mean, there's just like, if I were second dinner, I would not feel like I got my money's worth out of that event.
Yeah,
because these companies generally pay for these spaces. It was just, that was kind of crazy. So most of the people got the information from here. We see the roadmap, and then they wrote up a lot more stuff about it. And truthfully, watching the video after the fact really didn't provide too much additional information. In fact, I would argue the stuff they wrote up gave more information about most things. The one exception being a few things related to like the Deadpool's Diner event thing. They said a little bit more about that in person than they did on the blog. But for the most part, the blog actually had way more info because the segment was short. It was like a 13 minute segment, of which like 4 minutes of it where it was a cool thing. I'm sure if people were there, where some of the people from Second Dinner picked their favorite variant, and there was like a little trivia thing where people in the crowd could win like something as well as like that developer's favorite variant in game. And so like that's cool for like the people who are there, but like the people tuning in for the announcement don't really care about that as much. So I think the tech stuff was generally more useful to people. And the big thing here is that a lot of stuff is gone from the roadmap, and it's not the first time that has happened.
Well, yes, but I think that like when I looked at it, you know, at the end of the day, it is like tumbleweeds. Like a lot of things were removed, right? Like
yeah, and it's, I feel like it's kind of like we're in like this weird state where I think there are a lot of people who are feeling some stagnation with Snap, and it's not particularly, let's say, the metagame or anything like that that's necessarily causing it. It's, hey, this game is, you know, we're creeping up to our second year and a half old, and for some players, they are finding themselves just not as like excited engaging with the gameplay as they used to be. And a lot of people want to reignite that kind of spark they felt at the beginning of playing the game. And I think most people who've played a game for a long period of time can relate to that kind of feeling where it's like you almost wish you could go back and play one of your favorite games with no memory of it, because it's different than when you've played it before or played it a bunch. The experience just kind of hits different. And I think that is what is driving a lot of people's focus on wanting a new mode. I feel like I saw a similar thing happen in Hearthstone with new modes, where it's like when people find themselves not enjoying the baseline experience and they want to go back to how they used to enjoy something, the easiest thing to think of is, oh, just make a new thing that gives me that feeling. But that's way harder to do than it is to say, for sure. And I think for those who have kept up with Hearthstone a bit, you can see that in the comparison of, I feel like Battlegrounds did that for a bunch of people in a way, even though it's obviously not like the same because it's a different mode. But Battlegrounds really reinvigorated that passion for a lot of people because it was a cool new way to have fun with the game. And then we can see the other things they tried, like duels and mercenaries and twist and whatnot. Those things didn't go over super well and didn't capture what people were hoping them to be. And I think Snap faces a similar conundrum with the concept of a new mode, because I think when people are in that position, they often are putting a lot of their hope into a new mode, reigniting that interest and that passion. And so when it doesn't, that feels pretty bad for them. And the new mode, quote unquote, is Deadpool's Diner, which I found this really funny. When leagues first got announced and explained, someone asked on the Discord, hey, is this Leagues thing the new mode you guys have talked about working on? And they were like, no, Leagues isn't the new mode. It's just kind of this bonus thing. The new mode hasn't been announced yet. And people are like, okay, cool. That's good to know. And so I think that also helped set the expectation that the new mode would actually be a new permanent mode, something akin to Conquest that is a permanent addition to the game. And so now when they reveal the new mode and it's like, hey, it's this fun limited time event for the month of July and it's themed to the season, that's cool. But I think they kind of misplaced like what it was going to be when they told people like, no, it's not the new mode, it's an event. And then the new mode is also an event. That I found kind of funny, because I don't think it was like intentional. I don't think they were trying to like mislead people with that, but it seems like a funny oversight to me that the new mode ends up being a temporary event, like the first thing, which they're like, oh, it's not the new mode. But I don't know if we want to talk about the stuff removed first. Probably should, I guess, before diving into like what the diner is and all that stuff.
Yeah, we have a view of the last few roadmaps stacked up with the changes. I don't know who created this visual. I saw a lot of people retweeting it, but it did a really good job of visualizing the roadmaps that have been released and what has been added, what has been removed, and what hasn't moved at all. And it's pretty wild, honestly.
Look how full the other ones are. And on one hand, I can understand wanting to make a more lean roadmap if like you feel like this stuff isn't actually coming to the game and whatnot. Like there being less stuff isn't necessarily the problem in it of itself if it gives us a more realistic time frame of what's actually going to happen. Because it doesn't matter if they chuck a bunch of stuff on the roadmap if that stuff doesn't come to the game, right? At that point, what's the point of a roadmap? And the biggest, like, I think thing that brought all of this up was the fact that, and clearly the thing that legitimately overshadowed, I think, everything they talked about was character mastery being gone. Because I don't remember when they did it, but I believe they did a fairly comprehensive, like, general breakdown of what they were planning to do with character mastery, and a lot of people really liked that idea. Snap, we kind of joke about how like the collecting aspect is the real game, but to a lot of players it's really not a joke. That is the real game to a lot of people. There are legitimately a lot of people out there who
There's
this is a character collecting game.
Yeah, there's
right?
definitely a collector element to it. It goes with collecting comic books. It's right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the mobile genre, a big core concept of a lot of these things is, hey, it's a character collecting game. That's part of why they don't want it to be easy for you to collect all the characters, because they value there being something to chase always, right? They want you chasing that new favorite character or that favorite new art. Like they want you to do this. And for me, as someone who is like interested in cosmetics and whatnot, I thought character mastery sounded like one of the coolest things they could do in terms of like a cosmetic side, where, for example, I have like 6 Star-Lord variants. With the exception of one from a bundle, I've never bought any of those Star-Lord variants. I'm sure at this point, if you played for a long time, a lot of players, even those who haven't spent much, if any, money, have a bunch of extra variants for cards they don't play, or they have a variant they like better, so they're never going to use it. And one of the cool things of character mastery was that it sounded like you were going to get like rewarded towards cosmetics based on the fact that, hey, I have a lot of variants for this same character, or hey, I've split this card like 12 times. And some of the things they talked about initially with that were character specific, like the reaction emojis you can use on the board, potentially unlocking new types of splits other than like ink and gold, and we've seen some of that stuff in the data mines.
They even showed us examples of
Achievement
like
stuff.
the space one was awesome.
Yeah, they literally showed this stuff off. It was in the coming soon section, which generally means it was, thought to
In
be
development.
they specify what each of these things mean and how the in concept is very early stages, and coming soon means like coming soon to most people, I think, means this is a locked in thing that's actually going to make it into the game. And so when it went from a locked in thing that's going to make it into the game in January to 6 months later, it's now no longer coming at all, a lot of people really were upset by this, because that was for that group of players, those people might not have cared as much about a new mode. They just wanted to engage with the character collecting and customization aspect. And while there have been some, additions to the customizing stuff, it's relatively minor stuff like the borders or the nice thing of like, oh, you can apply your splits to other things. That was good. But Mastery excited a lot of people. I've also seen so many people say, I specifically was buying more variants for my favorite character, because you never know when they're going to show back up in this shop, for
Right.
character mastery based on how they described it. And what did that remind me of? That reminded me of first edition badges.
Yep.
Think back to me and Blue spending 6,000 tokens on Ghost, or
Yep.
the whole reason I
Your
bought
records.
Valkyrie when she was a Series 5 card still was because even though she wasn't very good at the time, I was like, oh, I bet very few people are going to buy Valkyrie. That'd be a cool little thing to be like, hey, I had this card back when it was really bad. I believed. And it's stupid, but mobile games are all about this stupid little like stuff. It's a common thing. But at least with the first edition badges, even though that upset some people, whatnot, you could say, well, it was in the concept stages and they also changed the release mechanism, so the badges didn't make a lot of sense. It sounded like they were having a hard time finding a way to make them look good. There were pretty, I think, legitimate feeling reasons for why they didn't go forward with it, even though that was disappointing to some players, and some players felt like it rubbed them the wrong way because they purchased this thing expecting one thing from what they said, and then that thing's not happening anymore. But I think that applies to so many more people with the character mastery, because how it looked like it was coming soon, they detailed it more heavily, and I think that spoke to a lot of their player base. The mastery stuff was something I think a lot of people really were looking forward to.
Yep.
Yeah. I bought some Lockjaw variants that I probably wouldn't have, based on Mastery. I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, but I mean, it's still annoying.
It's disappointing, right? Like,
Yeah.
and this is coming at a time where a lot of players are feeling like the game hasn't done enough to add like new features or new ways to like engage or be excited with it, which comes back to why some people are so focused on a new mode, right? I think to some people, Mastery was essentially as good, if not better, than a new mode because it gave them that, hey, this kind of re-excites me about engaging with the cosmetic side of things, which, I mean, Snap has generally been good at doing that. People love chasing their cool splits and making their
So
deck and character look cool.
they said they're gonna do character-specific albums as kind of a gimme.
It's not. It's just not close to the same thing. And also, it's so much more limiting too, where it's like,
Right.
as an Arrow enjoyer, am I expecting an Arrow album anytime soon? Probably not. So if you're not a fan of like a more mainstream or like MCU tied in character, that's probably not going to be for you. And also, like, I feel like Mastery seemed like a natural solution to a problem I feel like I ran into as a player who'd spent a lot of time and money on the game, which was I have a variant for most characters, and I like the variant I have for most characters. So the barrier of like how good or whatever something needs to be to get me to spend money is higher now, because it's not like, oh, I don't have a variant for this character, this one looks cool, I'll buy it. It's, oh, this is cool, but I already have one I really like, I don't really need to buy it. And I feel like Mastery was a decent way to help encourage people getting more variants for a character that they want, when naturally it's kind of hard to use multiple variants for a character. They don't have like the randomization feature, shuffle type stuff. But yeah, it's oh yeah, see, look at that with the cosmic background. That's super cool. And I'm sure the new splits and stuff will still be entering the game because they had, new collectible infinity splits on the roadmap. Although maybe sure is too harsh of a word because I'm not really sure about anything on the roadmap anymore.
Yeah.
But the point is, one thing I've seen raised by people is like, well, are they just going to charge money for these now? How are people going to get these? And that would make me kind of sad because I liked the idea of, oh, if I've split my Rocket Raccoon 10 times, now I have access to this split specifically for that character, like this fancy space split. Like, obviously, it's still something you could technically pay for, right? By just like buying splits for gold. But it feels more core to the idea they initially had of like, when people had a cool split, it was because they played the card a whole lot and upgraded a whole lot. And now I don't know if that's still going to be the case. I can't imagine it is, unless they just decide to add it as a free thing. I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe it'll be like Borders where you can buy it and then they'll cram some into an event or something as a reward. Who knows? But I do think it's going to look very different than how it probably would have looked under Mastery. And also the comment about Mastery, it got like one line and people are memeing on it pretty hard, where they well, we ran into some technical limitations with Mastery, so it's not happening anymore. #game development. And it's that's not what people want to hear.
Like, oh man.
That's not what people want to hear when, you said 6 months ago this feature was like coming soon. A lot of people were excited about the feature, and now when you're looking at the update, the feature is just completely gone. And it might be a little different if it feels like we got substantial stuff between now and then. But while there have been some nice upgrades, like the booster store thing now being like free boosters, that was cool. The fact that you can apply splits across your cards, super cool. They've done good stuff. It's not like they've done literally nothing, but I don't think they have done enough to keep a lot of players like super interested and invested, and that's why a lot of people were looking forward to this kind of stuff.
Oh man.
And so this really overshadowed a lot of the other stuff they announced, because it was hard to get excited about the stuff they were showing when the thing a lot of people were more excited about is just gone. And that's not even to mention how I feel like the way they present this stuff is really poor. Like I don't really like how they show, like they did this last year at the Summer Games Fest, where you're paying for this time, right? And you're going through like a more mainstream network to hopefully get more eyes on it. You want, potential new players, invested players. You get as many people looking at this as possible. do they want to? Does a new player or someone who's never seen Marvel Snap get anything out of seeing some pictures of the UI of this new mode on a screen? No. If you want to get people excited about this, you should show them some. It's coming out next month. It's not like this isn't done. Like, show them some gameplay in the new mode. Show them the stakes doubling multiple times. Show them getting the rewards from the thing. Like, you can get people excited about this by showing them the thing that they like, which is like engaging with the game and the gameplay. And they didn't do any of that. It's like, show not tell, I think, would have been a lot stronger in terms of getting people excited about the stuff they did show. And this isn't the first time they've done it. It probably won't be the last, but that's one common feedback I've had and heard from other people, is that, like, I think it feels like the developers are more excited about some of this stuff than the players are, which is really strange.
Yeah.
Hey, is there any word on when we can, like, I would split so many more cards if I didn't have to have these little sparkle effects on them?
No word on that, unfortunately.
Well, if you look at the roadmap, I think that what you want, Nate, if there's a chance of getting what you want, it's going to be in the custom card improvements that are coming soon or in development.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what that is? Maybe.
I just
It's
want the
certainly
option to,
possible.
like,
Custom card improvements. There
Yeah,
you
I'd
go,
like
coming
that too. Just remove the.
you
Let me
can
use
say-
gold without the secondary effects. Or
Yeah,
ink without the
yeah.
secondary effects.
it would. So for this is coming from somebody who has held off on splitting cards for a long time because I like the foil background with the red borders. And when we finally got this ability to customize the cards, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, now that I can do that, like, I'm not opposed to splitting cards anymore, because then I could get a background I want. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to go on a tangent here. It's going to be an ADHD moment, but you, sir, are a psychopath for preferring red borders with foil backgrounds. I will say that it is certainly a unique and cost-effective branding that you can put in, but
It's true.
It always strikes me when I see your list, because I kind of have to do a double take. Actually, you know what? I don't think foils are as bad as people kind of make them out to be. So
I love
foil
them.
plus base border has got to be the worst I've seen.
Oh,
Foil plus no border. I've seen people do that, and I'm just like,
yeah.
oh lordy.
Sorry, I interrupted you, but yes,
I don't know why I like
to,
it. I would, you know what? I tell you what, I like the neon ones, but I would buy them if it was like a once and done and you can use them across your collection. I'd buy them in a heartbeat, but you have to buy it per card? Like, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
And then we have new glitter ones.
I want a glitter. I want a glitter border.
The glitter ones have grown on me a little bit. Not enough to buy them, but
that
hey,
that Loki,
we'll earn some in the
Blutrane, that Loki
in the diner, apparently, maybe. But so, well, let's just read quickly what's actually on the roadmap, because we've talked about it a lot, but we haven't actually read what's here.
Can I just say that my confidence for this game is at an all-time high? I'm just
yeah, I'm feeling good. Oh god. So we have Deadpool's Diner, improved technical performance, and custom card improvements coming soon.
Wasn't the last patch improved technical performance?
There was quite a bit, actually.
Pretty bad bugs. So take that for what you will. I mean, yes, technical performance, I think everyone will tell you, has been an issue, and that is something I think players want to know you're prioritizing. I don't think the roadmap is necessily the best place.
Oh, they totally.
That.
All right, so I take this.
They're padding.
Who's been working in
padding.
I've been in not game development, but just in corporate America for over 20 years, and they put that on there so that there would be 3 bullets. It's a rule of 3. If they only had Deadpool's Diner and custom card improvements, I think it would be even worse. Although the problem is that when you smoke and mirrors it like this, it almost erodes confidence further, because you have you have the coming soon piece, which you're like, okay, that looks padded, and then you see draft mode and concept, and it gives you less. It makes me less confident that anything in concept is ever going to make it
Oh
to
yeah,
loading
in
day.
concept, just throw a little "not happening" sticker above in concept, because that, I think, genuinely is how a lot of people feel about the in concept stuff. Like, make it a 2-column thing. Again, probably rule of threes, right? But I don't think the in concept stuff is doing much. Also, absolutely shocked that they're actually coming out and saying, "Hey, we're trying out making a draft mode," because the old heads might remember they've been asked about draft a lot and they seem pretty against it, which in my opinion was for fairly understandable reasons, some of which being in the vast majority of card games draft is not super popular relative to like standard constructed stuff. There are definitely some big draft enjoyers and I get it, but not only is it more of a niche thing in a lot of games, um, it separates you entirely from the collecting aspect of the game that they, that's their bread and butter, is collecting cards. Obviously, you probably have to pay to enter a draft, so it's not like they make no money off of draft, but I would have to imagine, unless they find some genius second dinner way to really juice the price on it, uh, any money made off of draft will probably pale in comparison to, selling the normal cards, which, I mean, I think we've seen that before, right? And stuff like Hearthstone, right? Like, there's no way Hearthstone Arena is making as much off of arena runs as they are selling new cards, right? It's not even the same ballpark. And I think that's generally true across most card games, with maybe the one exception being Magic the Gathering, because it's kind of the oldest and was built on draft in a way.
Yeah, it's. I think. Well, yeah. Anyways, I think that your statement holds up for Magic as well.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm not trying to be a draft hater, because I've played, like, there's the Snapdraft website. Actually played that with like Lee one time and a few others, and it can be fun. It's not that there's no merit in it, but I do question if they're gonna put all this work towards a new mode. At least for me as a player, draft isn't really something that interests me. Like, I'm not super interested in draft in Marvel Snap. Even if it comes to the game, I don't see that being something I would engage with heavily. So when something like Mastery, which I was looking forward to, goes away, and I see some of the stuff they're working on as something that just doesn't really interest me as a player, I think that's a huge part of like what people are feeling bad about. So the coming soon stuff is all really small, except you could argue Deadpool Diner is a bigger thing, but we can talk about the details of that after. Alliances, which are clans, which they showcased and gave a date. So we have a date on both the diner and clans. The diner is going to be coming the beginning of next season, and then alliances is coming at the end, like the end of the month. Like, I think they said July 30th. So clans are joining Snap. Leagues, we don't have a time frame on. The only update we had on leagues was they did tell us they are scrapping the kind of pay to win perks element of it. So that was kind of a W for the community.
Right.
Even though the statement was kind of weird and one of those, well, we have to test stuff we think you might even hate just to, confirm that you hate it. That was a little weird, but all right, sure, whatever. And it seems like their answer to that has been, well, we'll remove these pay to win features that people didn't like, and we're going to have free leagues and paid leagues. So if someone really is excited about leagues, you could invest some gold into it and get better rewards. And to me, that seems fine. If they do the changes they kind of vaguely outlined a little while ago, I think leagues will be a thing that either you don't care about and ignore and you get some free stuff, or maybe it, makes you a little bit more excited to play for like a day or two while they do it and you get some stuff. So it went from leagues being, I think, a really bad thing for the game to potentially being a fine thing that some people might even enjoy. But we don't have a date on it. We don't have any time frame. None of that was talked about in the blog or the event. A new card mechanic. This got eye emojis in the write up. I think in something so light, if they actually have a new card mechanic, kind of, I don't know, together, I think showing something like that would have gone a long way. Heck, Cassandra Nova is going to be a reward for the Deadpool's Diner event. That uses, I imagine they're talking about a new keyword though, like move or discard or destroy. I don't think they'd put it on here otherwise, but The Cassandra card has like a new mechanic, which is like a drain mechanic, where she takes power from your opponent's deck and she gets bigger from the power she drains. Like showing that could have been neat. And then collectible Infinity Splits, no one knows what this means, but that was probably going to be a part of Mastery, right? It was like the space splits and stuff. So now we'll get them through some other means, probably for dollars in the store.
Yeah.
And then in concept draft, which they said it sounds very, very early stages. They're asking people for ideas. And truthfully, I just don't see this mode actually making it through because I just don't think it would be popular enough. And I don't think it would be kind of suited well enough to Snap's gameplay because Snap doesn't have all these filler cards, right? Like draft thrives off the fact of you get to play cards that like are normally bad, but in the context of draft play a lot differently. And in Snap, we do have bad cards, right, that don't see play, and you can play those more in draft, but I don't think there's enough of it to make it interesting. Because what happens when I'm drafting and I get this kind of mediocre draft deck and my opponent drafts, say, like 10 out of 12 like meta destroy list?
The only way that
Not
it'll
gonna be fun.
Yeah, the only way it'll be fun is that if the cards you're drafting are used in a different way than the way we play Marvel Snap right now.
Yeah, something would have to be different in the actual gameplay, I think, for it to be enticing. And I don't think that's really what they have in mind. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's early on.
I mean, it would be cool. Like, so, I mean, this is just coping and dreaming, but, if you had, like, something like Battlegrounds or Duels, and then you could incorporate, like, not Duels, Marvel Duel, you could incorporate
an auto
Snap.
battler.
Yeah, and then you could incorporate the Snap mechanic into that, and
oh yeah,
that...
I agree. I think something like that would probably be way more interesting. At the same time, also probably requiring way more work. I think that's kind of why they're wanting to keep the game mainly the same, because at that point you're almost just making another game, right? Just in the same engine.
But that's what people want.
I agree. I think
they don't want
that's
a game
what people
mode.
want too.
I think that like this is the problem where people, where the disconnect occurs. People will say they want a new game mode. They don't want a conquest. They want a new game. They want a new game to play with their cards. They don't want a new way to play poker. They want to use the same 52 card deck and play like Go Fish instead or something. That's what they want. That's
I agree.
Tough.
Yeah, it's a super hard sell as a company. Like I do not envy being in that position for sure.
Yeah.
Card acquisition improvements being on in concept is just really funny.
Well, you know what that is, right? I mean, they have to introduce some kind of catch-up mechanic for returning players and for the important new region they're going to start operating out of, China. And that's like, if you think about like what is the biggest issue with card acquisition that affects the business, not the players? It's the fact that people who have stepped away, like our good friend NHL and JFan1, feels like, well, I'd consider maybe playing Snap a little bit, but I've missed so many cards. How could I ever catch up? And
yeah, you can't engage with the game as it is in the current form because, like, you look at the lists we showed today, and there's so many new cards, and you just can't access them. Even if you paid a lot of money, it's not easy to access these cards. Because of how the spotlights work and how scarce tokens are and so on and so forth.
You have actually people will say, well, the spotlight mechanic is the catch-up mechanic. No.
It doesn't work. Spotlights are a terrible catch-up mechanic because often the people who quit the game and come back do not have a lot of resources. So they have to keep playing the game to get resources. And you can say, yes, their spotlight weeks will be better than people who've been playing the whole time because you can get, 3 or 4 new cards in a week. And that's great for those people. But in my experience, a lot of what happens when people come back is they come back, they ask some questions about what's going on with the game, they try to engage with it, they realize that it's really hard for them to play a lot of the things that are popular right now because they don't have a lot of the cards, and they end up quitting within the same week because the only way you're going to get resources to get those cards is by keeping playing the game. And it's not just playing it for a day or two or a week. you have to keep doing your dailies and your weeklies to get enough credits and missions to get the keys. And then you also have to be on a good week where that card you want is in the spotlights, right? So it's very like I think a lot of people will agree that if you stepped away from Snap, even as an invested player, if you come back a month, 2 months, 3 months, or longer later, the uphill climb you have, even if you're willing to pay money, this isn't even just for like free to play or pass only players, it is huge.
Yep.
And before they moved on to Magic, I think I found it really interesting watching someone like Mogwai come back to the game, because that was like a textbook experience of what it was like for a player who played the game for like a few months at launch, stopped playing, comes back a year later, and you got to see what that experience is like. And this is from someone who was willing to spend more money than probably the average player, because content creation's their job. They need the cards to actually engage with the game more on stream, and like they can justify it more than your average mobile game player spending money on a card game. And even then, they were still missing lots of cards and really limited by it. And if someone like that has those issues, what hope does a lowly pass only player have, or a free to play? It's just like, unless you're willing to just endlessly grind it to attempt to catch up, it seems impossible. And you're not having fun when you're doing that grind, because you can't engage with all the new stuff you want to engage with. And it's like, it's real bad.
I think the thing that really bothered me about the roadmap wasn't even the roadmap itself, which was disappointing. I think most people were disappointed. But it was the reaction of those that felt personally slighted by my disappointment that instructed me
really
that
weird.
I was wrong to feel disappointed, and that it's outrageous. And I'll just say this. I've said it a couple times on this show already. You don't get to tell people how they should feel. People are disappointed. Perhaps you should be curious as to why so many people have a view that's different from yours. And then, of course, naming and shaming is the most cringiest thing. And please don't do that. You will regret it at some point.
It's just weird. It's just very weird. And I think that's one of those things that also comes from, you get it more in a free to play game, because you have like a large group of players that views it as, well, it's free, so I can't really criticize it that much because I've gotten all this enjoyment and entertainment and it's not cost me anything. And it's like, I get that, but I think a lot of those players are unwilling to understand the people who are actually keeping the lights on for the game are getting kind of, not so happy with a bunch of this stuff. And those are the people that keep the game running.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you really appreciate being able to play a game for free, maybe think a little bit more about the fact that, hey, somebody actually does have to pay for this. So it's unsurprising that a lot of the people who have issues are people who have actually invested a bunch of money into the game, and they want, and I don't mean invested like they're looking to get a return on it, but like you're looking to get a return on like enjoyment, right? And I think as time has gone on, for a lot of people that has lessened. And these are people who want to keep enjoying the game and playing the game, but like they want a new way to do that, or something to rekindle that spark. And well, let's just say that the things on the roadmap don't seem to be it. Even though I do think the best takeaway from it was that, assuming it's not that hard to get, it is good that you get a new card through an event. That's the first time we've seen them actually give away a card, right? Like a Series 5 card. So like, I think if they framed a lot of this stuff differently, or approached it differently, it would have been possible to frame more of this as like something to be excited about. But the way it was done was just like not good at all.
Don't worry though. We will have a Keep It Cosmo Alliance. Applications will be available on the Born to Be Wild website. We're going to need to see a pay stub from your job.
Like
making enough money. And collection level has to be over, I don't know, what's an absurd number? 30,000? 30,000? And
we got to make sure you can keep up.
Yeah. No, we're gonna make a Cosmo clan. I don't know if there's gonna be limited. I
Yeah,
hope
that's
they
the
don't put
one
caps
thing.
on it or anything. So
I don't know. Do we have the image of the clans that they had? Because like I will say, as someone who's not super interested, like the clan stuff seemed fine. Like, uh, people seem very divided on the clan stuff because like I've heard from a lot more of the casual people, they kind of dislike it because they don't want to feel obligated to join a clan and do stuff in there to get more rewards. They just kind of want to play the game how they've been playing it.
becomes like a chore like conquest.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen a few people say exactly that, is they don't want another chore like conquest
And
to
conquest
get all the stuff.
can feel like a chore sometimes.
Definitely. And so like I'm not overly excited about it, but um it definitely looks like they put time and effort into it, and it could be a good addition to the game. But it's not something I'm super excited about. Like I'm not like, oh, I can't wait for July 30th because we can make a clan. And yeah, according to the data mine stuff, we can see 25 members, which
Wait,
kind of sucks.
That's old. Let me see. Here's the new.
Yeah, this is old information. They didn't specify the amount of numbers in the presentation. We just got an idea at the UI and what it's going to look like a little bit. But I do think the smaller number is a little bit of a bummer because that makes it hard to
25
for, like-
people. That means that you're gonna have to pay a lot of money to get in.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
SafetyBlade,
you can't
you better get out your
engage with
checkbook.
all your, like, for social media people, influencers, whatever. You can't engage
Wouldn't
with all your
you-
followers. And
Yeah, wouldn't you want your 25? That's insane. Remember when
Yeah.
Hearthstone was at 100 or something, and then
Yeah,
they
their friends
doubled
list was
it?
capped at
Yeah.
100.
Yeah, but 25 is like, oh snap!
And, like-
it's just terribly low.
I like it looks like they put time and effort into polishing it. Like the UI looks good. The ideas here seem fine and simple. It's like, oh, you get bounties, you complete them to get points, and presumably you get rewards from the points. And you can see there's a little leaderboard thing there where it's like who got the most points and doing bounties and how many cubes you earn, so you can compete against your friends. And like if you have other friends that are playing Snap, this is a cool little like thing. Especially if you have a bunch of them. Although I'm curious how many people are in that position. But yeah, it looks fine. And I'm sure some people will really like it. I'm sure some people will entirely ignore it. But it's not something that like changes how I interact with the game much. It just feels like, oh, in addition to my daily quests, maybe I'll think about one of these bounties or something. Like, oh, because they overlap with quests, right? Like play a 4-cost card, or when like a lot of these really are just like quests.
It could be an interesting way to engage with other people. It looks like there's a little bit of a social aspect, so that
Yeah.
could be fun.
And it looks like you could see if you look at the picture here, it's really small, but on the far right, there's a picture of a deck list. Like it's
yeah,
in the chat.
I love that. Like
You
for
see,
sharing decks in game, that's cool.
It has a little paste icon, like a clipboard
Yeah.
icon. And
So you
so
just, like, copy
presumably you could like copy and paste decks in here,
Mhm.
which would be really pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice. Like now, instead of having to send it over Discord and it's a picture and this really long code, we could just send it in the little Cosmo crew thing, and boom, now you can check out the deck. So like that's cool. I like that there's a social element.
I'm
to it.
afraid that someone mentioned this earlier when we were talking about, this is in chat. I don't remember who it was. I have to scroll. When we were talking about the space, like galaxy backgrounds, and they were like, that's not a screenshot. That's like a PSD template, like Photoshop file, right? And I'm like, that makes me so nervous that that's what this is, right? Like,
Yeah,
because remember, that's
if
what
this
they
is
did
just a
also.
mock-up.
That's what they did when they first released the PC UI was
Yeah, these are mock-ups for sure.
So
Yeah, it very
like,
well could be. Look, they even have the little clan tag at the top of it. I don't know. I hope that whatever it looks like here is, because like the fact that they committed to a date on it, I'd have to imagine if the feature is launching in just under 2 months, they're not leaving it all till the end, right? Like, I don't know. Like, if they're committing on the date, I feel like that it's probably most of the way there, right? Unless they run into some last minute technical limitations like mastery.
You know that meme that has the Star Wars one with Anakin and Padme. They're like, they didn't save it till the last minute, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like that's what you just did.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will forget about it after a few days. It's not the most exciting thing. It doesn't do it doesn't reinvigorate people playing the game. It doesn't even really change how you play the game, really. It just gives you some more quests and presumably some more rewards. And hey, free stuff's never bad. If it gets you more free stuff, that's nice. But it doesn't really excite me a whole lot to be like, okay, we'll have a group now. It'd probably excite me a little more if the numbers were higher so we could get like people who watch the show in the same group, and that'd be cool. But like with only 25 slots, it just ends up feeling not fair in terms of how you end up like selecting people to join, you know?
Well, maybe for us that'll be a fine number, but for some of the larger
you don't even have to be that large.
I guess, yeah, 25 goes quick actually.
Yeah, it's we're just between, you know, the three of us and SafetyBlade, that's down to 21. It's already a large chunk. So yeah, unless he makes his own and we have to battle it out.
No way. I'll ban him from his own stream if he makes his own.
The Marvel Duel one filled up in a day. Is Duel the same size? I think Safety said that there are a lot of similarities between clans and Duel and what they're looking like in Snap. I'm not as familiar, so I don't know. Yep, 25. Okay, so it sounds like it's the same type of thing. And this is very common in mobile games. I'm sure if you don't know anybody or don't have a thing to join, there will also be ones that suggest to you. I'm not super familiar with this, but I've had other people explain it to me that this is very common in mobile games.
Yeah, they had something like this in Diablo Immortal. Like remember they had those clans. I didn't play
Warcraft Rumble had it too. Like most mobile games have like a clan system to help get people more involved. So like that's fine. And then the diner is like probably the biggest and soonest thing, right? And so that's where I think a lot of the attention has been directed towards. And do we have like the image they showed with it? Because they showed some like UI from it. But God, I really wish they would learn, like show it in game if it's that close to being done. Showing UI stuff feels like it doesn't do a lot for it doesn't do anything for new players. Like how's seeing these UI pictures isn't going to make someone in the crowd be like, oh, I should download Marvel Snap when I get home tonight. You know, it's like, I have no idea the context of this. And they did that last time at Summer Games Fest, which was an even bigger audience and presumably cost them even more to showcase. And it's just, it felt weird. Like, I remember the reaction was similar when they showed stuff off there last year when they were unveiling Conquest. It was just some previews of the UI, and it's like, why is that what we're showing and not the fact that like some gameplay or whatever, especially in this where the gameplay is going to have a twist on it. And the twist on the gameplay in Deadpool's Diner is that instead of cubes you have bubs, which for all intents and purposes are cubes, except unlike cubes you don't have an unlimited amount of them. You get a set amount of them and then you're wagering them like you do cubes. And there are additional, the meme. Snap Allegiance's date announced. You're almost done with the mode, right? Right? It's great. Classic meme. But the whole thing of the Deadpool's Diner, the idea seems to be it's adding additional doubling mechanics. So auto doubling will happen on turns 4 and 5, as well as the final turn of the game, and when players snap, right? So that is much larger numbers than we're used to, right? Where it goes up to 8. Now it can double like 2 more additional times. So like going from 8 to like 32 essentially, right? That's a lot. That kind of changes things. And so from what we've heard from data mines is that you'll get a set amount of bubs to start out with, and then they'll replenish over time. Obviously you'll have more of them by like winning and whatnot. And presumably you can spend some money to get bubs back faster, which is the monetization component to this potentially, which is, I mean, that's kind of like a classic mobile game thing, right? It's like you have X amount of currency and you use it, and when you run out, you either have to pay or wait.
It's a little scary that there's a card behind it. Like, part of it's really cool, and part of it's like, what if I suck at this mode, right? Like, and I lose all my bubs and I can't get the card. Like,
yeah, all right.
Right?
I definitely want to address that because we can see there are different tiers here, right? We can see the cereal tier, you need 80 bubs to play in. Whereas the chimichanga one, you need 10.24 million. That's a pretty big difference in number of bubs. I have to imagine this is cumulative, like the bubs you've earned over time, not dependent on the ones you currently have. Because if it's not, this seems insane. When I say that as someone who plays quite a bit of this game, it just seems nuts.
80
and you can see
2.4 million is like...
I think that's 10.24 million.
What? That's insane.
And then
like,
Cassandra is 500 million. Now, someone has pointed out that that's the variant. Maybe I would hope and like to think that the base card will be a very early on reward, and you can see you can get like the avatar and some borders
please
and
God,
the thing.
yes.
But I really hope that like people should be celebrating the fact that they're getting a new card for free, and we don't know that yet because we don't understand how the structure works and how easy it is going to be to get the card. If it's easy to get the base card, that makes this mode a lot better because you gave people a little bit of a different way to play, even if it's only temporary, and they got a new card out of it. That's something to be like, okay, cool. I'm happy. I'd rather that be in the game than not be in the game. But when you see these big numbers, and also they don't make it clear that, I think a lot of people have assumed that the only way to get the card is to get that max reward, which just seems very difficult given the large numbers here. And it is specifically a limited time thing. This is going on during this clearly themed to the Wolverine and Deadpool season. They're tying in with the movie, right, with the season, and it's only going to be happening during the season. And then it's going to go away. And I think they kind of alluded to that. It could come back in the future, possibly, probably themed to whatever other, season is going on at the time, and that's cool. So, like, not all the work goes to waste, right? And just like doing it one time. But like we talked about earlier, I think it's a pretty big disconnect from what a bunch of players were hoping for in terms of like this new permanent thing that makes them more interested again. Because this is like super, super far away from that. It's just not the same thing at all. Yeah.
Well, they've never really been super in touch, so I don't know. I don't know what to say. I enjoy this game, and I feel like we always do this, right? I'm kind of down on the game, like that I really enjoy playing, but like, jeez.
When it rains, it pours, and Snap, and this is definitely a rainy week.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go into this with much expectation. Like, I feel like I had pretty low expectations. I was like, okay, they're probably going to show off the new game mode, whatever it is, and they'll probably give us the roadmap. And I didn't expect much more beyond that. And while that is what they did, the roadmap stuff was soured really hard because of mastery. And the mode, well, I'm sure it will probably be okay. I can't say I'm like super excited to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to spend all this time grinding the mode next month. I don't know how it's going to feel or play. Kind of one of my worries about the mode is that with the auto doubling happening on 4, you're going to have a lot more games where people leave on turn 3. And I think early retreats happening often is less fun Marvel Snap usually. Like, you could say it's more tactical or competitive potentially or something, knowing when to double down versus knowing when to get out, and sure, but Marvel Snap is not trying to be this super competitive card game, right?
You know what's going to happen. You're exactly right. People are going to retreat early. So what people are going to start doing to kind of hedge is they're going to start snapping on one.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be like, I don't know. I think some people get really frustrated when people snap on one. I do. I always think it's, especially like if you're in a conquest series and you're like a game 5 and you have a good hand and you know exactly what's what, and you snap on one, okay. I'm like, but like people snapping like before they even know what it is that you're playing, let alone what you have in your hand, let alone what the locations are. Like I don't know. I find
Yeah,
that
like it sounds less
irritating.
fun to me, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Like
It's
that.
just like, yeah.
Think about how many people, and I do this a lot as like a streamer and whatnot, but it's like, I feel like it's true where a lot of people will want the game to play out. Think about how many people you face on ladder who they're like dead to rights, but they stay in because they want to see what happens. Or maybe you're facing an opponent who has a cool deck, and I'm just like, I want to see what they do on the final turn, even if I'm gonna like lose more as a result of it. Like, there's a certain element of fun in watching the game play out, and I think the way this new mode is designed, uh, it pushes you away from that. Um, at least it sounds like it's not going to be battle mode like Conquest. So I'm glad they're learning that their strength in Snap is the fast paced games like on ladder. But like I don't think this twist on the idea really changes a whole lot for people. Like, and if it does, if we're wrong, maybe in practice it's more fun playing this than it sounds like. But if that was the case, you gotta show us this if you want people to be excited about it. Don't just explain it. Show it. Show me some high stakes gameplay or whatever. Like, come on. It's coming out in like 20 days. Like,
Yeah, the fact that there's no gameplay 20
it's
days.
really weird to me. Like, maybe they're
Yeah, it's
saving
not
it for the
good.
next.
They're all working on the weekend to try to finish it.
It's like
Maybe-
it's
yeah.
like the movie that doesn't like have like a sneak preview or only is embargoed like into the day it releases. Like that's usually a bad sign. And I'm not saying that's happening here. I'm just saying that naturally people are going to assume the worst coming off the back of things being scaled back quite a bit. It's the momentum seems to be in that direction. So it could mean nothing, but like generally speaking, if it looked really awesome, you think they'd want to show gameplay.
Yeah, right. Like, because that's a lot more exciting than just kind of explaining it and showing the UI. Like, I get we can appreciate that they have nice UI in their game and they do good work with the art, but that's not really the reason I'm playing the game. Like, it contributes to it, but specifically, like, oh, the fact that they have nice conquest menus or nice game mode menus, that is very much not the reason I'm playing Marvel Snap. I'm playing Marvel Snap because I like the gameplay, and you know, show that is what you are good at doing, is the gameplay. Keep your expectations low and you'll never be disappointed. That's the funny thing about this, is I feel like I went in with low expectations. I know a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, I had no expectations. It
And
was
so
just,
like, I think a lot of people are really feeling it because they put a lot of eggs in the basket of truthfully, I do have to question, like, I don't know, man. I feel like they need a marketing team or a marketing person, because I feel like this is, we just keep seeing these things that are just
man,
abysmal marketing.
their poor new community managers like working overtime already.
Yeah, I honestly feel kind of bad for them because they're just getting started, and we're peaking at all this the like all-time like negativity or whatever from what I've seen from the community.
I still love the game. I still enjoy the game, but my goodness,
yeah,
it's like
it just,
despite their best
draining.
efforts, like,
yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like
know,
it's working against itself.
you know when I enjoy the game the most?
When
Ladder reset.
yeah,
I
think the game is very. I think I kind of feel similarly.
The problem is that I also feel compelled to finish the climb quickly because I'm pretty. I base this nothing more than on my own empirical observations, but I'm convinced that bot frequency is less a factor of rank or MMR and more a factor of how far away you are from day one of reset.
yes,
Yeah. It's
And
interesting. Their system mystifies us all, right? Like they're never
Yeah.
going to give us the full breakdown because that's, proprietary and they don't want that information out there. Understandable. But I have been surprised at how like I had an okay rating, not the best, but when I put like time in and had good results, I saw that reflected in when I finished my climb, the snap points I had the next season were surprisingly higher.
And my snap points are about the same. And last season was when I made that realization, because Nate got no bots, but entered in much higher than me. Well, not
Mhm.
much higher, but relatively a couple hundred snap points. So that kind of really got me thinking, and I'm too much of a coward to put my hypothesis to the test, because I want to have a cozy climb, because that's when I enjoy the game the most. I don't enjoy the
Yeah,
game when I'm like giga sweating and like infinite conquest. I
we'll
find that,
never forget the Zabu season, right? That
yeah,
was
or the
by
Zabu
far
season,
like
yeah.
the sweatiest like infinite climb ever in Marvel Snap, and it was not fun for a lot of people. So yeah, I think the bots do add value there in the initial climb, where it's like people are just trying to mess around with the new card a lot of the times, try something different. Like I think a lot of people approach their climb relatively casually. Maybe not the whole climb for everybody, but I think that is an aspect people do enjoy um, about it. And yeah, it's interesting to see how it all works with the snap point stuff. And but there's definitely work to be done there, especially with the online leaderboard, which is just I didn't know this before, but like it can be like it seems to be wildly inaccurate at times, and it will just randomly like the numbers in game always seem to be accurate, but their online leaderboard where you can like look at the standings often seems to like randomly omit players on stream. When I was trying to check who was ahead of me, sometimes when I'd refresh it, me or the number one other person weren't even there, even though they obviously were in game, and it was weird. So that's, but I don't think that's a super priority for them because like it's a very small percentage of the player base that cares about that at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a lot to talk about today. It was a lot of news. Wish more of it was positive, but I mean, there was some positive stuff thrown in there. So it wasn't all bad, but
Yeah, appreciate everyone hanging out for the 2.5 hours of show.
It was good.
longest
There's
one in
a
a while.
there was
Yeah.
a lot to talk about this time, and I
Yeah.
think we got to get our thoughts out, and I think they were pretty succinct. I mean, I'm always pleased that we can, uh, discuss some things that are kind of negative about the game, but still keep a positive attitude and
Well, I'm
kind of
going
have
to
fun.
disagree with you, Nate. Succinct is not how I would describe a 2.5 hour
I'm sorry. What I meant was
podcast. I think was
this is long
objective.
and drawn
Yeah.
out, but we were positive anyhow.
Yeah. No, I think it's an
Positively
objective.
negative.
I think it's an objective view. I mean, we'll call it the bad, and of course it's just our opinion, and you're welcome to disagree with it, and that's okay too.
That's what
That's what
keeping
it
its
means.
Cosmo is all
Yeah,
about, right?
that's what keeping it Cosmo is all about. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna call it there, and
Before we
yeah.
go, do we want to do that quick end question?
Oh, yes, thank you. I do. I really do. So if Nate will bear with us for
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's
5
fine.
more minutes, little bonus content. So a lot of new games were announced over the last couple of days, because this is the time slot where E3 used to happen, and I guess the game conference that succeeded it occurred, and a lot of cool games were announced. And yeah, I'm wondering if there was one game in particular that stood out to you that you're very much looking forward to playing.
Yeah, do you want to go, Blue? I know you had one.
Yeah, so Cappy Games has announced their new game called Battle Vision Network, and I am so stoked for this game. It looks like a combination of two of their games that they released in the past, Might and Magic Clash of Heroes and Grindstone. And here I'll put the trailer in the chat, but it's going to come out on PC and Netflix. And what that means is, in order to play the game on mobile, you have to have a Netflix subscription. Netflix has been accumulating a real compelling roster of games on mobile associated with
Yeah.
their subscription, including one of my favorite games of all time, Into the Breach. Now with this, it might be time to sign back on to Netflix. So yeah, Battle Vision Network. That's the one that I'm really looking forward to. Here's a link to their tweet where they put out a trailer, which by the way includes gameplay footage.
Yeah, you can learn a thing or two from them. Second dinner.
So that was mine.
Oh, Dead Cells is in Netflix. That's awesome. Dead Cells is great. Yeah, I'm not super tuned into all this stuff, but I actually have heard about how Netflix has been curating this like roster of games you can just like they're quality games you can play on mobile that are just like mobile ports of really good games that you can just have access to by paying for Netflix if you're already doing that. And like that's cool. That is pretty cool. I haven't heard of the one you talked about though, so I'll have to check that out.
Capybara makes good games. Grindstone was amazing, but my favorite game of theirs was Might and Magic Clash of Heroes. That came out a very long time ago.
I
but
think
this
I've heard
looks-
of that one. It sounds familiar.
It's on Steam. You can look it up. But this game looks like it just looks like a combination of both. Plus, it's gonna have PvP like battles, which Might and Magic Clash of Heroes had, and they were so much fun.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know when it's gonna come out, but I'm in.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Some stuff that I was really excited about. There's some of you may have heard of Gris. It was like an indie game a couple years ago. Really beautiful art style, short single player game, focused around like puzzle solving, but really like I really like the puzzle aspects, but the thing that drew a lot of people in was really the unique and very beautiful art and music. And the same developer who made that game is making another game that looks to be in a very similar style called Neva. And I don't actually know all that much about it. It's like a adventure platformer, puzzles. Obviously, there's story stuff to it. There's like a deer you have with you, and it like grows and fights with you and other stuff. But I really liked their first game. A lot of people did, and I'm looking forward to this new one that's coming out this year. And then there was one other thing I wanted to mention, which is Metaphor Re Fantasio, which that is a mouthful. But basically, I believe a lot of some of the people, I don't know, is it the art director? Maybe I have to look. Some of the folks involved in the Persona series, making like Persona 3 and 4 and whatnot, are no longer with Atlas, and they're making their own game, and you can tell it is very inspired by their time with the Persona series, which is like, a RPG, story RPG that's pretty long and kind of like demon Pokemon, where you catch them and battle with them and fuse them and so on and so forth. And it literally looks like a persona in everything but name. They call their personas archetypes. So it's kind of funny, but it's always neat to me when you get to see people who worked on a really acclaimed series get to do their own thing, like make a game in that genre. It's kind of like one you brought up a while ago, Blue, which is what was it? The Bloodstained and Castlevania. For those who aren't familiar, it's like the guy used to be really a big part of Castlevania, made a same style game that obviously wasn't under the name, but was the same kind of thing. And that's what this feels like. And it looks really cool. And it very much has the stylistic menus and whatnot and all this stuff that I feel like we're used to from Persona. And I love that aspect of it. And the gameplay looks similar. So I'm really looking forward to that in October, as well as the Diablo 4 expansion, which looks awesome. So a lot of cool different stuff I'm excited for, and a bunch of other indie stuff that would take another 2 hours to talk about.
Where do you guys find all this new game info? Like, I've just been living with my head in the sand, I guess.
Well, they have had big showcases like this weekend, so that has been part of it. Like you might find this neat, Nate. They are doing a Lego Horizon game, Lego Horizon Adventures.
Oh,
so
really?
It's a Lego game in the Horizon universe. It looks pretty fun.
I loved the Horizon games. They were so fun.
Yeah, I remember you liked them, and obviously you like Lego too. So that's a cool mashup. But I'll link you guys, and I'll see if I can put it in the chat. I found this one random person on Twitter who tweets about indie game releases constantly. And as someone who's definitely been getting more, I've always liked indies, but like it can be hard to be aware of everything going on. They've showed like following them, I found out about a bunch of really cool smaller games I feel like I wouldn't have heard about otherwise. So that's part of how I've kept up with it. Because it's gaming. There's so much going on, and it's like it's hard to keep up with, especially smaller titles. It's hard to know like when this stuff is like happening or that it exists even, right? But yeah, indies are cool.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Support indies.
When I find an indie studio that has games that look interesting to me, I tend to follow them on Twitter because it's the only way that I can keep up with it. So I follow Capybara's studio, Cappy Games, and they just tweeted out about it, and I just bookmarked it and came back to it when I had a minute.
I'm still waiting for the for Silksong, the sequel to
oh, I know. Every
to Hollow
time,
Knight, right? So
yeah, every time there's a new event, there's always people getting hyped up about finally showing Silksong again and getting a release date. And it's here, I'll link in the chat to the.
It's all right. You know what? When it finally comes out, it'll be amazing.
Oh, it'll be phenomenal, and it gives me time to actually finish Silksong because I still haven't. I started playing Silksong during the Loki season when I physically couldn't handle playing.
Oh, Hollow Knight, the original you're talking about? Oh yeah, it's so
the
good.
original.
It's so good.
Oh, I said Silksong. Yeah, I meant the original, and I haven't beat it. I got sidetracked, but I want to get back to it because it's a really fun game, and I love Metroidvanias. Animal Well was really good. I just beat that recently from the first game from Donkey's studio, and that game was if you like puzzle Metroidvanias, not so combat focused but more puzzle focused and like environment focused, highly recommend that game. I had a phenomenal time with that game. It really gave me like kind of like old Metroid vibes, but not as much of a combat focus as old Metroid was. More puzzle.
Yeah, I've had my eye on that for a minute. It looks good.
It's highly recommend. It's one of my more favorite indie releases. It was really good.
Well, there you go. There's some games that we are looking forward to that are not Snap related.
And let us know yours in the comments. Boom, engagement.
Boom, engagement. Yeah. Also, it might allow us to discover something that we wouldn't have seen otherwise, just because there's so much going on. So thank you for the overtime segment, for staying for the overtime segment, and we will catch you next time.
Keep it Cosmo. Oh.
Enough said, bub.